is 7 p.m. on Wednesday, November 6th. This is the Riverside School District 96 Committee of the Whole meeting. Kathy, could you call the roll?
Okay, Mr. Bersati?
Present.
Ms. Kalick?
Here.
Mr. Hunt?
Here.
Ms. Claps?
Here.
Mr. Marhol?
Here.
And Mr. Muirhead?
Here.
Okay, quorum is present.
All right. Let's start with welcome to Central Elementary by Principal Pete Katz.
Good evening, everybody. I feel like we should do a movement activity to start. No, I'm just kidding.
Dan just got all his steps.
Running in from outside. I get
Limbered
it.
up now.
You were out in the playground, right, Dan? Is
Yeah.
that what you were
Yes.
doing? Waiting for the last lights to be gone so you can get your
Absolutely.
exercise in? But thank you. The playground is just to start has been fantastic for the students. It's been a great addition, long overdue and long needed, but it just changed the dynamic of recess, of right to play breaks throughout the day. Students are here into the evening too as well, so it's just becoming a space for the community as well. So thank you for that. Conferences are coming up in a couple weeks, so it's great to see parents signing up. We want to continue to see that in the new system, and it's been much easier with communication with parents to get those scheduled. Today, the 4th and 5th grade students from across the district were all here at Hauser for the cyber safety presentation from Detective Rich Rostaki, and that was very well received as well. His presentation was fantastic and very appropriate to the students. So it's been busy, and it's going to get busier over the next couple weeks as we working out of a couple of extended breaks from learning, but it's been a fantastic start to the year. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, is there any public comment?
There is not.
Okay. We will, any proposed changes to the agenda for tonight from any of the board members before we get into it? No? Okay. With that, we will bring up Education Committee first in the Student Achievement Report. Ms. Kalick, I assume you're inviting Angela up to give us the
Yes,
overview?
please.
All right. Dr. Dolezal?
Good evening, everybody. It is my favorite time of the year. It really is. That's not sarcastic at all. I like talking about our student achievement and the successes our district's having and the work we're doing coming up for the school year. So I'm very excited to talk about our student achievement report for this fall 2024. Before I begin, though, I have to say that while I'm the one that sits up here and gives the report, it really is a team effort. And the work that we do for our student growth and achievement is done as a leadership team. So I just want to thank our whole district leadership team and specifically thank our principals who are in attendance tonight because it is the team effort that gives the results that you'll see. So tonight we are going to look at MAP growth and achievement. Our strategic plan report card does have a key performance indicator of MAP growth. So we'll talk a little bit about MAP growth. We'll talk about IAR achievement. We'll talk about the equity journey continuum and the state report card, our successes, and our further areas for growth, including our next steps. When we start with MAP data, we're going to look at reading and math growth by grade level, reading and math achievement by grade level, and then we'll look at reading and math achievement by cohort. So starting with our fall to spring reading growth, this first chart here shows the growth of every grade level that takes MAP, 2nd through 8th grade, and it looks at our fall 2023 to spring 2024 growth. The purple line is a projected change in RIT score, and what that means is what NWA MAP does is they look at about half of students nationwide will make the growth they'll make over time based on the nationwide student growth norms. So that purple line is based on nationwide trends. The light blue line is the 23-24 growth in RIT points. And then you can see historically how second graders have performed in their fall to spring growth, or third, fourth, etc. You can see that for this past school year, every grade level met or exceeded their projected growth targets by MAP in reading, and so that is one of our celebrations. And you can see that we had the largest growth at our primary grade levels. For math, you're looking at the same chart, same type of chart. Again, that purple line showing the projected change in RIT score that about half of students nationwide will make over time based on that nationwide, that national student growth norms. Again, the purple line shows that, or I said that, the purple line shows the projected growth, and then you can see the teal blue line shows the 23-24 growth in RIT points for each grade level, as well as how grade levels have done historically on fall to spring math growth. And again, all grade levels met or exceeded their projected growth. So we're growing in both reading and math. We're doing what we need to show the growth that we want to see in our students. What we'll talk about though is how that impacts student achievement. So those past two charts talked about fall to spring growth. These are the spring reading achievement scores. Achievement being the national percentile for the mean RIT score for the grade level. So looking at the grade level's average RIT score and what's the national percentile rank for that average RIT score at that grade level. You're looking at last year's grade level achievement in the spring, and you see historical data for the past 7 years. The gap is from the 1920 school year because we didn't take a spring MAP assessment, so we weren't able to have a fall to spring growth. So if you are looking at the 8th grade column, what you're looking at is last year's 8th graders, current 9th graders. And those 8th graders had a spring achievement in the 89th percentile. You can also, if you choose, follow back the bars to see how the 8th graders performed over time. So when they were 7th graders, it's that teal bar. When they were 6th graders, it's the orange bar. When they were 5th graders, it's the green bar. 4th grade was when the pandemic hit. 3rd grade is the red bar, and then you can see that first blue bar is 2nd grade. So you can see over time that our 8th graders' achievement has decreased as a cohort at the springtime, but you can see in 8th grade, we're continuing to grow the 8th grade curriculum, students who have gone through the 8th grade curriculum, continuing to grow where they're at in the achievement level. We look at data this way to see how we're doing with our grade level curriculum. So when we're looking at the different curricular areas, if we're noticing gains, then something's going well with our curriculum because year after year, then 8th graders or 5th graders, whatever grader, continuing to grow as they're being exposed to the curriculum. If we're noticing losses, then we would want to see, is that because of the curriculum? Is that because of the cohort? But we would explore that further. Here you can see that all of our grade levels, except for 2, did show growth from previous spring achievement levels. And the 2 that did show a decrease, it's a slight decrease that we'll keep an eye on. It's the same chart for math. Again, if you look at our 8th graders, these are last year's 8th graders, 9th graders now, and you can see that as 8th graders, that they had a spring achievement in the 80th percentile. And if you follow them back, their achievements kind of been up and down. And so that's something where we look at that cohort. As a leadership team, we talk about that group of students. The elementary principals have insight into who those kiddos were in elementary school, and then the middle school principal and assistant principal are able to talk about how they've been doing over the course of 6th and 7th grade. So we're having conversations about the students, but then also looking at, is there a curricular focus that we need to look at any of those grade levels where math has decreased? I do want to say that with math, these are the adjusted scores. You might remember last year where we talked about there was a new MAP assessment that was given for the fall, winter, and spring, and that the scores were really high, elevated by the time we got to the spring. And we had to run a concordance table to figure out what were the equivalent scores when you look at the 2020 norms, which is how MAP will norm the data and pick the national percentiles for the different RIT scores and so forth. So these are actually adjusted with that concordance table. And what I've noticed is that they are significantly lower, so I'm curious, and we'll be talking with the NWA rep about if those concordance tables have shown a larger decrease with the 2020 when compared to the 2020 norms, and when they're renorming for next year, 2025, if that's going to show a slight increase, because those drops, some of them seem very significant, and I just want to dig into that a little bit more.
And that's specific to math, not reading?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, math was, and that's what their studies showed, that math was significantly impacted to where they had to do those concordance tables where reading was not. So now this is looking at specific cohort data. And what you see here is the achievement, which is the national percentile for the mean RIT score again for the grade level. You're looking at this year's student starting point from their fall math assessment. So sticking with 8th grade, if I look at our 8th graders, this is this year's current 8th graders, and that blue line is their average percentile for that 8th grade group, which was in the 90th percentile. So as we, as building leaders, as district leaders, when we look at this, this is our starting point and where we want to see our students grow from when we look at that fall to spring data at the end of the school year. What you see there for 8th grade are all of their fall MAP scores, percentile scores, for that cohort. So right there grouped together instead of having to go back over time, you can see all the 8th grade scores from percentile scores in the fall for reading since they were in 2nd grade. One of the things to note is that the fall 2021 was our hybrid year, so that green bar was the hybrid year. And you can see since that hybrid year, all the grade levels have grown. 4th graders were in preschool when the pandemic started, so their first year of kindergarten, their kindergarten year, like all their testing there is since the pandemic, so they weren't impacted by that, and you can see that in reading. 4th graders have grown each fall, as well as 3rd graders, and 2nd grades when they start, so there's only that one data point. This is for math, same chart. This is again cohort data, so these are, when you're looking at the 8th graders, their fall scores, each fall of their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade year. Again, I noticed that dip in math for all grade levels. This is the chart that really brought it to my attention that I wanted to dig into that a little bit deeper. And so that's something that we continue to focus on. So then looking at IAR data, our proficiency data for IAR, proficiency is the percentage of students who are proficient, which means they met or exceeded the state standards, received a level 4 or a level 5 on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness test. So we'll look at our geographic peers and our lookalike peers for ELA, math, and science. And just as a review from last year, our geographic peers are the districts that are part of our West Suburban Consortium for Academic Excellence, our WSCE districts. They're in Cook and DuPage County. The enrollment of these districts ranges from 444 students to 5,548. You can see the per pupil expenditures range from 12,009 to 26,500, and the per pupil instructional expenditures range from 7,000 to 14,007. The average low income ranges are from 1.7% to 67%, and there are actually a couple of districts that have such a small low income range of students tested that it's actually redacted. So you can see that with our geographic peers, there's a wide range. And right there I have the Riverside statistics just so you can see where we fall in that wide range, which for most of that data is pretty much in the middle. So the great thing about when we work with Don White from EDLS to pull together our IAR data is he also does a look-alike comparison. And he takes districts that have similar statistics as Riverside so that we're comparing our scores to districts that are similar to us. These look-alike peers that he pulled were from Cook, DuPage, Lake, McHenry, and Will County, with school enrollment ranges from 1,100 to 2,300. Per pupil expenditure ranging from 16,006 to 19,006, and per pupil instructional expenditures ranging from 8,005 to 11,000, with the average low income ranges between 19% and 28%. And again, the Riverside statistics are there. As a reminder, these are the West Suburban Consortium districts. And Brookfield-LaGrange Park is not part of the Whiskey districts, but because they are a feeder school for RB, we do add them to our comparison group. So the first chart you see is the geographic peers comparison for the ELA proficiency on IAR. And you can see the red line going across is a reference point of Riverside's spring 2024 IAR ELA proficiency score, which was 71.9%. So 71.9% of our students met or exceeded the state standards in ELA. And then you can see where other districts fall. What I can tell you is the districts that go above the red line that are performing at a higher proficiency rate than Riverside are districts whose low income ranges are anywhere from 1.7 or the redacted districts to there's one district that has 18% low income. Then the other thing to know about those districts that are above the red line is that their next highest racial ethnic group is usually their Hispanic group, much like ours. But their Hispanic group population is anywhere between 7% or 16% or 11%. So compared to Riverside, where we have 32% Hispanic, we're a little bit more diverse than those districts that are above that red line.
Can you tell me, is there a reason the districts are redacted on here?
Because since the data was just embargoed,
Okay.
and we did this last year too, because the data is just embargoed, we want to allow other districts to tell their stories
Sure.
before we put it out publicly.
Okay.
This is public data, it's all unembargoed, but we want to be able to let our colleagues be able to tell their stories before we do.
You were wondering about the name, the districts aren't named, but you were wondering about the low income, why a low income number is redacted? Is
Oh.
it- oh.
Which one are you wondering?
Which one did you ask?
No, why the names were
Okay,
Okay.
gotcha, okay.
These are our lookalike peers for ELA, and this is where it's really interesting to look at our lookalike peers as well as our geographic peers, because when you start comparing us to districts that are similar in makeup, demographics as Riverside, you can see that the range from the lowest, from the lowest district, when you're looking at maybe putting them in order to the highest, is 43.7% of their students meeting or exceeding standards, up to 74.6% of students meeting or exceeding standards. And when we looked at it from the geographic lens, the range was 36.6% of students meeting or exceeding to 82.6% students meeting or exceeding. So when you look at the lookalike peers, it brings it more into perspective on how we're doing as a district. So this is a chart for geographic peers for math. Again, the red line showing where our score, Riverside scores were for spring 2024 on the math IAR. And the range of our geographic peers in math is anywhere between 11.2% meeting or exceeding to 76.8% meeting or exceeding. And we've talked about how our math scores are lower than our ELA scores. I do want to point out that's a state trend, and that's a trend that you also see on in these charts, even with our geographic peers, where one district, their ELA percentage was in the 80s, but their math percentage is in the 70s. So all districts are noticing a difference between their ELA and math. It's not specific to Riverside. I know Governor Pritzker put out, the state superintendent, Tony Sanders, put out a message about the difference between math and literacy, and the state's looking into that and how can they help address that across the state. So it is a state trend and something that all districts continue to work on. This is our lookalike peers for math, where the range is between 48.7% meeting or exceeding standards to 58.9%, which is Riverside score, meeting or exceeding in math. This is science for our geographic peers. where the range is 36.2 to 87.2. And in our geographic peers across all 3 subject areas, Riverside does fall right in the middle. And this is science for our lookalike peers, where the range is 64.9 to 77.9. And so you'll notice for all 3 subject areas, Riverside with the lookalike peers falls in the top 1 or 2. Part of our state report card includes the equity journey continuum, and that's something that we started talking about last year. The equity journey continuum looks at data a year behind. So what you're looking at here, those yellow bars, are the most recent scores on our equity journey continuum, and they're from the data from 22-23. So the data for the equity journey is always a year behind. For every metric comparison in the equity journey continuum, it's a comparison of special populations, so students with IEPs or low-income students compared to non-special populations, as well as white students compared to all other races and ethnicities. So that every indicator in the equity journey looks at those different comparisons. You can see in student learning our our STEP score increased. We're moving from large gaps in our student learning to moderate gaps. Part of that is due to our number of students who were enrolled in and who passed 8th grade algebra. That is one of the components that's looked at for student learning. We were also steady in our IAR participation, growth, and proficiency, so that steady piece helped with the areas that we were growing in to help increase from large gaps to moderate gaps. In learning conditions, you can see that we moved a little bit from that small gaps, the upper end of small gaps, to probably the lower end of small gaps. Part of that is due to in-school suspensions. We had no in-school suspensions reported in 21-22, but we did have a slight increase of in-school suspensions in 22-23. So because of that, there's a slight decrease in the score. Also, there was a slight decrease in our student rating of a supportive environment on the 22-23 5 Essentials survey. And there was a slight decrease in our parent response rate on the 5 essential surveys in the 22-23 school year. So those things are all accounted for in our equity journey continuum. And then in elevating educators, this is looking at our educator demographics compared to our student demographics, looking at teachers compared to students, as well as administrators compared to students, and also looking at the percent of students who have at least 50% of their classes taught by teachers with a master's or higher, or 4 years of experience. And they look at that, breaking it down by student groups also. And so we did have an increase in the percent of students who have had at least 50% of their classes taught by teachers with a master's or higher. And so that helped impact that slight increase on elevating educators. The state report card was released on October 30th. If you're interested, you can go to illinoisreportcard.com. It's also linked from our school or from our district website and from the school web pages as well. The information you find on the school report card includes academic proficiency and growth on state assessments, our 8th grade students who are passing Algebra 1, which are 9th grade standards, our equity journey continuum results that we just looked at, our district environment data, student demographics, teacher demographics, admin demographics, and our accountability ratings.
So, I'm sorry, for the previous slide, so is that an index from like 0 to 4?
It is, yes.
So does that mean anything, or is that, how is that index arrived at?
They take the different pieces, like the different parts I was talking about, and there's more to it than just the ones I mentioned. I was just mentioning the ones we noticed change in. But they take the different indicators under student learning, for instance, and they have a formula. There are different formulas and business rules. And it usually looks at the percentage of students who, so like for kids data is one of them under student learning. It looks at the percentage of kindergartners in special populations who are showing they're ready for kindergarten based off the kids data, compared to students in non-special populations who show they're ready for kindergarten. And if there's a significant gap between the special populations and the non-special populations, then your score is lower on the equity continuum. And so they take the different pieces under each student learning, learning conditions, elevating educators. They take those different pieces, and then they have another formula, that they use to combine those pieces that gives you your step score.
So if we were looking at a different district, I mean, would that be kind of a similar trend in terms of more of a lower scores tending on the equity elements and then higher scores on the, or excuse me, the student learning, excuse me, so would we see with similar districts like lower scores on student learning and higher on learning conditions and educators?
I don't know, I don't think that would necessarily, you can't generalize it that way.
Okay.
Because there are certain districts that are not fully staffed, and so there are teachers who are teaching out of their field, or there are students who are not receiving instruction from teachers with masters. So their scores in elevating educators are going to be lower there because they don't have the same type of educator experience that we have here in District 96. That may also impact their student learning and or their learning conditions, but it really depends on the individual districts and how they're addressing the different components. Another factor that differs from district to district is like the students who are enrolled in passing Algebra 1. That's something that Ms. May, Mr. Harvalis, and I have really been focusing on and trying to ensure we're providing opportunities to more students to be able to be enrolled in advanced 8th grade math, because that's where we teach the algebra standards. And in our focus on that, we've been talking to other schools and other districts, and across the board, everybody handles it differently. So there are some districts where they only have 4 or 5 kids who are receiving 9th grade standards in algebra. And then there are some districts where they're saying all of their 8th graders are receiving it. So depending on how that plays out, they're gonna have higher scores or lower scores. So it's hard to generalize that everybody is lower in student learning versus elevating educators. It really depends on each district.
Okay.
So really, this is just a better gauge of ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And what improvements we're making and changes we're making to move up on the scale. As a reminder, summative designations, so that's the exemplary, commendable, and so forth. Those designations are developed based off of these indicators, which are weighted as follows. We know that growth is 50% of a summative designation, 25 of that being ELA and 25 being math. Proficiency in math and ELA is 7.5% each, and proficiency on the science assessment for 5th and 8th graders is 5%. 5% of the summative designation is based off of our English learners' progress to proficiency, so their performance on access testing. And then 25% is based off of climate, so 5% of that is the climate survey, and that is the student participation rate on the 5 Essentials survey, and 20% is the chronic absenteeism percentage. Which brings us then to our 24 District 96 school report card. This is a snapshot of what you would see. This is what you first see if you go to that Illinois report card site. And you can see for summative designations, we had 2 schools that were exemplary and 3 schools that were commendable. And I want to point out that those are both great scores. Exemplary schools are schools that are performing in the top 10% of schools statewide with no underperforming student groups. The only difference between exemplary and commendable is that exemplary is the top 10% and commendable, you were not in the top 10%. But you're still performing high with no underperforming student groups. You have to meet a certain threshold every year to be in that top 10%. And I just want to point out that the 3 schools that were not in the top 10% missed it by a range of 0.72 on their score, on their index score, to missing it by 8 points. So that's how close our other 3 schools were to also being exemplary.
So given that the large part of the measure here is growth, is this something you'd expect to bounce around?
Yes, as schools continue to grow. The 2 commendable schools were Blythe Park and Central Elementary School.
Exemplary.
What did I say?
Exemplary.
Sorry, the 2 exemplary schools were Blythe Park and Central Elementary School. And Blythe Park did show a significant amount of growth in both ELA and math. And so, yes, if schools are showing more growth than another school, then it could, yes, bounce around from year to year.
So yeah, the school that's growing a lot in one year may not have as much room to grow the next?
That's a possibility, absolutely.
Okay.
And we've had that happen in the past, too.
We have, yep.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Blythe Park wasn't exemplary last year, so.
I want to say Ames and Hollywood, maybe. but-
Hollywood was exemplary last year.
Yeah,
The other
okay.
4 were commendable.
Okay.
And so you named a few statistics that I was going to ask you about of like how far, because I think Hollywood didn't, I think because some of the underperforming classes or whatever, there were some that I think were completely like kicked out because the populations weren't high enough or something like that too. So it feels like kind of a moving target each and
It
every
is,
year.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. A couple of other things on this snapshot. Chronic absenteeism, you'll notice, is at 11% for the 24 year. And we know that that's been a conversation for our leadership team as well as for the Board of Education. And I want to point out that that 11% is a decrease from last year's report card, which was at 15%. So our work and our efforts on, our building leaders' work and efforts on identifying students who are chronically absent and working with families to address their needs is paying off, and we'll continue to work on that as well. And then the other thing I wanted to just point out from our snapshot is you'll notice the $19,000 on school finances, and that has increased over time. It's reflective of added staff members and added curricular resources. And if you have further questions about that, my wonderful friend Jim Fitton will be available to answer them. And this is just a chart to show you those finances over the course of time. So I've talked about some successes throughout the presentation, but just want to highlight again, all 5 schools received a rating of exemplary or commendable from the Illinois State Board of Education. All grade levels continue to meet or exceed our projected growth for both reading and math. All grade levels are demonstrating growth on IAR ELA assessments. Several grade levels demonstrated growth on the math assessment as well for the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, and we've had that significant decrease in chronic absenteeism. Areas for continued focus, we are continuing to work on accelerating our growth in mathematics. So I talked about how we are showing growth in mathematics, but our efficiency score, our achievement scores are still not where we want them. So we need to work on accelerating that growth for both IAR and NWA MAP so that we're bringing our achievement more in line with our reading achievement. And one of the ways that we're doing that is using supplemental resources to reinforce identified areas of focus based on student assessment data. You may have remembered that the MAP score for 8th grade was a little bit higher, and part of that we have attributed to a successful pilot of ALEX at the 8th grade level, which is a program that you might remember we purchased at the end of the year for this year. So we continue to utilize ALEX and IXL at the middle school to continue to work on identified areas of focus, and we continue to use iReady's MyPath to identify specific needs for growth for individual students as well. We'll continue to focus on opportunity and equity gaps as we continue to address the equity journey continuum. One of the things we talked about as a leadership team is working to increase our student stamina and endurance on different assessments, including being able to read longer passages and respond to longer passages. And we were actually just talking about this today during our leadership team meeting as we planned for our next 75-minute PD, where we're looking at the assessments coming up for Unit 3 and CKLA for all grade levels. And what we noticed with 4th grade is their Unit 3 assessment in 4th grade is similar to the type of assessment they take for IAR, where they're going to have to read 2 passages, respond to both of them separately, and then make a comparison about the 2 also. So CKLA is going to help us in increasing our student stamina as well. And then we're continuing to work on ensuring student connectedness, because we know when you feel connected to school, you attend school more often, and that's where your learning happens. So, spoke to some of those next steps, but continuing our focus on equity and opportunities in all areas as part of Goal 1 of our strategic plan. Building and district leaders continue collaboration to address individual attendance concerns. We have ongoing analysis of our subgroup data to continue to provide support appropriately. We're continuing our Tier 1 support with small group instruction across K through 8. We're supporting the successful implementation of Amplified Core Knowledge Language Arts, or CKLA, at the elementary level. And we're utilizing our empowered teams structure for planning and assessing instructional strategies that are impacting student learning and growth. So with that, I open it up for questions. All right, well, have a good night.
I'm stepping back. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering, if you go to the lookalike peers for science proficiency, it seems like this, for some reason, science, this one group seems to be pretty, they're closest to uniform, or at least to my eye, compared to some other subjects, especially math. And I'm just wondering, why is that? Is that chance? Because it's not as uniform in the geographic. Or has that question come up before, perhaps? Maybe not.
It hasn't come up. It's not, you're correct, it is more uniform among the 3 subjects and lookalike peers than the other. Science is more uniform than the other 2. It is not as uniform, like it's less uniform in the geographic peers. That part, I think, is attributed to just the different populations that are being educated with the different resources and different structures that the districts have. Science, I think, is also a little bit more condensed in proficiency because of the more general nature of science, and it's only tested at 5th and 8th grade, where ELA and math are tested 3rd through 8th grade.
Okay. And I guess also I had a question about the geographic peers in math proficiency. I guess that seems to be, well, definitely you've noted that the proficiency across the board is lower for everyone, but it seems that math seems to be have the highest differences, or I guess the districts that are higher than us seem to be a lot higher than us for several years, as opposed to it's not as noticeable on ELA. And is there anything to be said on that, or are these districts that are higher than us, are they not suffering that same decrease in proficiency that we're seeing at other districts like ours?
I don't have a solid answer for you on that. My first question goes to what resources are they using and how long have they been using it? My next question would go, when talking with my counterparts in these districts, my next question would also be, what resources and support do they have outside of their Tier 1 instruction? Which are things like ALEX, IXL, as well as MTSS, Tier 2, Tier 3 services. So it'd have to be a conversation with those districts to see specifically what's happening in their math programs, to determine why those differences might be. But I don't have an answer yet.
Okay. But I guess in particular for the lookalike districts, we seem to be doing quite well against the other similar districts in pretty much all the categories. Am I right on that?
You are, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's definitely very commendable. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So kind of on that note, I think you answered one of them by saying what curriculum are they using and what resources are they using. Kind of a secondary question with our curriculum changes we've had, or we've adopted 3 last year, and then the CKLA is just rolling out this year. So what level of impact, just kind of a broad question, what kind of impact does that typically have on a district in that particular year before it kind of leads to improvement or a decrease or whatever? Just kind of curious about that transition of it, since everybody's kind of learning new material. The teachers are learning how to teach it, the students are new to receiving it, I suppose, but like, how does that usually impact over the course of time?
With curricular adoptions, you often see what's called an implementation dip for that first, sometimes second year of instruction as teachers are learning the resources and materials. We're now in our 3rd year of iReady at the elementary level, and with Carnegie at the junior high level, what we adopted was just an updated version of Carnegie. So Carnegie has really been a consistent resource for us at the 6th, 7th, 8th grade level. So you would have probably noticed, we're in our 3rd year this year, so you would have usually noticed an implementation dip with iReady, but when you look at our data for math, like I have our lookalike peers up right now, you don't see an implementation dip. We actually continue to grow. I will say a lot of our teachers have stated that they are seeing growth in student skills in math. We're just not growing as fast as we need to show those significant achievement percentiles, and that's why we want to work on accelerating our growth. So that's iReady. This is our first year of CKLA. We know that it has started off a little bit bumpy, and teachers are still learning how to use the resource. So we may see an implementation dip in our ELA scores coming up next year. But as you continue to get used to the resource, you rebound from that dip and you continue to grow. I am curious to see if it's like math though, and we don't see a dip but continue to see growth. That's obviously the hope. While the teachers are working through how certain resources in CKLA work, they are teaching CKLA and they are seeing differences in their students' learning and their engagement in the learning. And the building leaders are seeing it also when they're in classes observing. So, and then I see with science, just having a more structured science. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing with science previous to adopting mystery science. And clearly, their own things were not going bad. They were getting decent scores. But now with a more structured science, everyone teaching the same lessons and having a scope and sequence, kindergarten through 5th grade at the elementary level and 6th or 8th, we will hopefully continue to increase our science scores because now we're planning for all areas of topics.
So you'd mentioned 2 different more specific cohorts around kind of the geographic versus the lookalike districts. Is that kind of the assessment of the main driver of some of these results, is like the low income and just the overall diversification of the population of the district? Or like, is there anything we need to do with those sub-segments to help support more? Or
I always appreciate how willing and open the board is to how can you help us do our job better. There isn't anything I think the board needs to do right now. We as a leadership team need to continue to put a focus on our subgroups, and what's good for some is good for all. And so as we're working on meeting our subgroup needs, that's going to help everybody because the strategies we put in place for our subgroups will be beneficial for everybody. Yes, to go back and answer the first part of that question, diverse districts are going to have different scores. Like that diversity does play a role into how scores are determined, and the diversity plays a role into the types of scores we're getting. You know, just something as simple as you think about if a student, my daughter, when she was in elementary school, struggled with math, and we had the means to sign her up for a mathnasium, right? But there are other students who struggled just like she did, who may not have those means. So when you look at diverse populations within school districts, there are certain things that families can do to assist and help, and certain things where families may not have those opportunities to be able to provide that outside assistance for whatever reason, whether it's financial or whether it's time or, you know, single parent families, 2-income families, whatever the case might be. There are just different things that play roles in diverse family structures and being able to help outside of the school day as well, which is one thing that plays a role in student knowledge and growth. It's just not always a level playing field.
sure. I think we've kind of stated it at the board of like, we want to make sure that because the overall results are positive, we're not leaving people behind. And so
100%.
that was the core of my question, is there other things you need to help everybody achieve?
Yeah.
But I understand not just because you provide somebody a resource doesn't mean they're necessarily gonna absorb it or learn it, or, there's a lot of variables that go into education and learning and things like that, so.
But even just, like, I think back to in the spring with the board, or winter, with the board approving the additional EL teachers, that's going to help us address our EL subgroup population, because now we're able to put in the time and services to students where we weren't able to necessarily because of the caseload level. The additional social workers helping with our students' social emotional health so that they're able to be present for learning. So you are doing things to help us better meet needs of our subgroups, which is also helping us better meet needs of all students.
So you need space and time
Yes.
to allow these things to work.
Yes.
Okay.
Nicely put.
I think just at a very high level, I think you all should be patting yourself on the back, and a huge congratulations. There's a lot in these reports that you all should be super proud of, and I know that we see just this little bar move slightly, but behind that is so much hard work and effort and dedication and ambition, and it goes seen, and I want you to know that we value it. And what you're doing is so impactful. Our kids are becoming more proficient. They're showing up to school more often. They're meeting standards. They're achieving growth like they haven't over the past couple of years. That's super impactful. So thank you, and Martha, thank you for your leadership, and Angela, thank you for just being really persistent, because I know it takes a lot of dedication. And then just, to call out some of what I see as being super great highlights is we're just showing such steady improvement in our proficiency, and that's an encouraging sign. And look, I know I've sort of harped on absenteeism, but that is such great news to hear that we've improved that in such a meaningful way. So look, I just want you all to know how much we appreciate it, and are just so grateful that our community is doing right by its students and giving them a chance at a really great education.
Thank you.
I think we're all hardwired to strive for that aspirational 100%. But thank you. And Marlo, I think you said it when we were previewing this with Marlo just the other day, that the great challenge in the educational system is to ensure that we are meeting the needs of each and every student. And it is what this group works on every single day. And the growth is very encouraging and very positive. And we don't want to take that lightly, so thank you, because this group that is attending the meeting tonight especially, I think, is driving at that all the time. Without letting test scores be the thing, right? Test scores are a thing that show us an important indicator of our growth and our success, but I think when you mentioned the chronic absenteeism, we also know this team is meeting with parents, who are struggling to get their children to school for often very complex reasons, et cetera. So, so thank you, and really thanks goes to this group and to all the teachers in the classrooms.
Yep, thank you.
I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, Personnel Committee. I don't know which one you was taking.
So I think,
You?
who's going to
Nora's
provide the
here on
proposal?
Zoom, actually.
Really?
Yeah, so she's going to join
All
us.
right, so Nora is
Yes,
going
we
to
did not get to
provide
meet,
Right.
so.
a special education proposal.
And speaking of services to students, and when we feel that there's an additional need that's appearing, this is something that Nora Garrity, our Director of Special Ed and Student Services, has been carefully monitoring, and came to me recently and said, I think we may need more supports for our students with IEPs. And I keep looking over there like Nora's going to appear.
This is as close as I'm getting, unfortunately, tonight, but I'm glad to be here. And actually, this proceeds really naturally from the end of Angela's fantastic presentation, talking about those subgroups and making sure that we've got the resources in place that we need for all subgroups. So if we go to the first slide, I just want to provide some context tonight about what our staffing levels currently are, why we're seeing a need at this point in the year to request your consideration to add to those levels, and just give a little bit of understanding of what is the caseload of a special ed teacher. I think a lot of us, based on our own experiences with our own kids or our own experience in school, we think of a teacher, we think of a class size, we think, you can picture a second grade teacher and have a kind of an understanding of what is their caseload, so to speak. And I think special ed teachers can be a little bit more doing more things or doing different things throughout the day that you don't see all of it. So with that in mind, I'm going to provide just a little information, a little overview about our numbers, and then welcome any questions that you have. So right now we've got 3.0 at Ames and Central, 3 full-time special education teachers at both Ames and Central, and 2 each at Blythe Park and Hollywood. All of that current FTE is in a traditional case manager, resource teacher role. So they have a certain number of students who they are the case manager for their IEP. They are providing direct service minutes. They're providing consultation to teachers that the student is working with throughout the day. It's all in that role. With prior to the 22-23 school year, we still had that 10.0 FTE, but 1.0 of it was allocated not to a traditional case manager role, but to one staff member who was operating in more of a behavioral, academic, and inclusion consultation resource for the rest of the special ed team across the elementary district to work with students who were just maybe pushing the limits of somebody's expertise, and you'd have like, oh, I've tried X, Y, and Z, still not seeing the growth I'd like. What other things can we think of? What other ways am I missing to support this student? Or when we're going into gen ed, we're running into this issue again. What am I not thinking of? What else can we be doing to support the student? At that 22-23 school year, that FTE was allocated back to caseload support because of an increase in student needs. So if we go to the next slide, we get into a little bit of what are we considering when we look at caseload for a special ed teacher. If only it were as easy as saying, oh, everyone's got a caseload of 10 students, we don't want to go above 11, or something like that. It's not as cut and dry because, as we know, every individualized education program is different. It could be anything from 30 minutes a week of working on strategies for organization and work completion to 240 minutes a day of pull-out instruction in those core academics. So it's a real range of services that these IEPs can represent. So it's number of students, number of service minutes, the type of service minutes. We have students who receive special education services outside of their general education classroom. They might leave for 30 minutes of enhanced reading instruction or really specific math instruction in a specific goal area. They might receive a replacement curriculum that they are operating, in a manner that they need just a smaller group to learn those same skills, same concepts that their peers are learning, but they need more specific direct instruction. Those are some academic areas. We also have functional goals in an IEP where, as I referenced, you might be receiving instruction, organization, or time management or project management. Like, how am I managing this long, trying to think of what elementary projects might be. I'm researching this state. I have a presentation that I put together about this state or about this planet, and how do I break this down and manage it so that I'm ready at the due date. And then those minutes can be either, as I said, pulled out of the gen ed classroom or they could be received within the gen ed classroom, so the special ed teacher is going into that 3rd grade classroom or 5th grade classroom to provide additional support in that setting. When you consider the types of services provided and the ways in which it's provided, that push in versus pull out, and if you have even a passing understanding based on when you have to send musical instruments or gym shoes or something to school of what the elementary school schedule is like, you can imagine that's another big variable when you're looking at caseload to say, okay, I can pull out fourth graders from reading, they're doing it at this time of the day. I've got 2 students who are working on the same thing. Can I pull them at the same time? Can we align the stars so that works out? So sometimes they can. Our principals, I don't know if they're all still there or not, but they are masters with that schedule. But it also can factor into, are we able to serve 3 students at the same time, or do we have to break that up and then it's 3 different sets of IEP minutes? So that's another consideration in looking at the caseload. Additionally, we're looking at students who may have behavior intervention plans. So they're needing a level of specialized support and response to behaviors that requires that special ed teacher to be working closely with paraprofessionals, gen ed teachers, specialist teachers to make sure everyone's giving the same level of support to that student across the day, because that's how you are able to effectively intervene with behaviors that are challenging for a student. And then one final piece we're looking at is the number of evaluations and reevaluations each year. So once a student is in special education, they have to, every 3 years, go through a pretty thorough evaluation, including all of their team members. Look at, are we meeting the needs correctly? Is the student still eligible for special education? Has the eligibility category changed since that initial eligibility? And do we need to be doing something that we're not? Or are we ready to graduate him or her from a service that we are providing that they don't need anymore? All of that process for that special education teacher is additional assessment, observation, consultation, and collaboration work that factors into what does that caseload look like for a year when a student is in an evaluation versus a year that they're not. And then that's a reevaluation. Initial evaluations, we need our special ed teachers to participate in those too. So if the student who's not on their caseload, but the school team is considering, does the student need an IEP, we need to have a special education teacher as a part of that initial process too. So all of these things are things that we look at when we're looking at caseload. I just went to advance the slide on my screen and realized I'm not in control, so we can go to the next slide. Specifically at Ames and Central this year, and I'm gonna kind of talk about them together because the need is split across both those buildings. And I just always want to be mindful when I'm talking about special education that we're a small district, and I'm always mindful of not wanting to be too specific about needs that might be identifying. So we have had an increase from last year and the year before to this year in service minutes and the complexity of IEPs. And when I say complexity, I mean, again, looking at that continuum of, is it an IEP with 1 or 2 goals that has, a small number of minutes each day, or is it something where a student has a variety of things that they're working on and needs services frequently throughout the school day? So looking at minutes across the building, not for any one grade level or one student, we're looking at academic and instructional pull-out. Special education minutes increased 12%, and functional, even more than that, 14%. And that a third factor was that, this year, ELA instructional time, we're having to look, as we implement this new curriculum, our special ed teachers are also learning it and getting used to it, and understanding how does that change the way and the timing of how they support students with literacy and ELA goals on their IEP. So it's another factor that we are considering. Another piece that has impacted the increase in minutes is we had a pretty high number of move-in students. Every summer, it's natural, some students move out, some students move in. This year, we had 11 students with IEPs move into these 2 schools after August 1st. So sometimes I'll hear from families as early as February or March saying, hey, we're moving into the district, I've got an IEP, this is what it looks like, and so we're able to plan and kind of be a little bit more aware of that need that's coming. We had, just as, it happens, it can happen year to year for sure, students moving in after that August 1st date. And then we also, we have, as you know, a variety of students who are receiving services outside of our District 96 schools, because their needs at one time or another needed more support than we could provide within our home schools. We are very excited that we are welcoming some of those students back, that they are demonstrating a lower level of need that doesn't require a different location. They're ready to come back to home schools and their home district, but that is, they still do require a level of support when they're coming back to that home school. So when I look at where we are, I think we can go to the next slide. I'm gonna press pause on the slide for a second to just give a little bit more context. We always are ready and know that across the year we're gonna build caseloads. We're gonna build, what a special ed teacher's caseload looks like in August. They're going to have more students. They're gonna have different minutes as IEPs change across the year. By the time we get to April, May, and the end of the year in June. What we're seeing is that we are reaching a point by now, October, November, where we've already accommodated a lot of changes, a lot of increased minutes, a lot of different IEPs, and we're reaching that point where the flexibility and the ability to add new students into the existing schedules is, again, at a point where we're used to seeing it much, much later in the school year, just based on this different kind of complexity of needs. As we're looking even beyond this school year, because I would never, we can survive and problem solve, but if it seemed like it's just this weird bump of a, constellation of students this school year, and as we kind of project where kids are gonna be, it's gonna level out next year, we could figure it out, and there could be, some teachers volunteering to timesheet plan times and, other ways of looking around the schedule that are not great, but could be survivable for a year. When we look ahead, I'm forecasting that it's pretty likely we're going to be asking for additional FTE for the start of next school year as well, in addition to 1.0 at this point. It is very likely, based on the numbers that we have right now, that we'd be even looking to add to that next school year. So that's why I feel confident that this isn't necessarily something we want to work through with our current FTE this year if we can go a different route, because I think we're definitely going to have the need continue as we go forward. Next year specifically at the elementary level, we've got graduating fifth graders and incoming early learners that we always look at as we're looking at students, just, the IEP numbers across the building. Across the schools, our incoming kindergarten cohort is forecast to be larger than our exiting fifth grade cohorts, not just, again, in number of students, but in the complexity of those students and the levels of service and instruction that they're going to need. And specifically in some of our elementary schools, it's a much larger number of kindergarten students that are coming in. So it's something that we are already aware of and working with the principals and the staff and our early learner staff to really make that a successful transition, but it's going to require additional FTE support. And then in addition to that we already know, those early learners, that they're not all, they haven't all had their IEP for next year yet, because it's only November. But again, we can kind of forecast out what are those needs potentially going to look like in kindergarten. In addition to that, we always have the move-ins that I referenced. We continue to have students returning to homeschools. Again, even if they're not right now at this moment, we're in constant conversation with those serving schools to say, yep, they're on a great track, and we anticipate they're going to start maybe one class back in the spring and another in the fall, and just start that transition. And then our ongoing initial evaluation. And then it's cut off from me, but I think it says continuing need to look at that least restrictive environment. I just wanted to take a brief second here to say, Angela was referencing the whiskey districts. I tend in special ed to look more at our LADSI districts because I just work more closely with LADSI and then the districts within LADSI. I think just even comparing to our peers, District 96, and say this, and I feel comfortable bragging about it because it was in place before I before I arrived. So I don't want this to be perceived as Nora's celebrating herself here. I want to celebrate our team because our district, our principals, our buildings, our special ed teachers, and our gen ed teachers have a real belief that all of our students, whether they have an IEP or not, are general education students first. They are all a member of their general education class. There's not, this perception of if they have an IEP, they're another teacher's, but they're like, oh, that's your student now. It is very just inclusive from the get-go in terms of that mentality within the building, that we appreciate all the resources that we have, the special ed teachers, the social workers, the psychologists, but all of those pieces are working to make sure that we are able to instruct students within the least restrictive environment, and make sure that they have the greatest access that they have to gen ed curriculum and gen ed peers, while having also the supports that they need to learn. But that again requires an ability to be in a couple different places at once, rather than just having a group of students that you're providing special education to for the majority of the day and kind of operating in a silo. All right, I think the next slide then. Yep, the request and recommendation I have tonight then is to increase 1.0 and approve to post for that position for this school year to be shared between Ames and Central. And then to continue to monitor the FTE needs for 25-26. Obviously in education in general and special ed specifically, nothing is ever set in stone. Things could change, kids could move in. But it is looking exceedingly likely like we will need that additional 1.0 for the start of the next school year as well. Question? It's hard on the screen. I can't see if anyone was ready to interject with a question, so I'm sorry if I barreled right through you, but happy to take any questions now.
Nora, this is Joel. For the, I don't know which slide it is, but you said prior to the 2022 to 2023 school year, one person was allocated between behavioral academic inclusion. So does that mean these 10 individuals right now are trying to cover that work as well?
Yeah, so that work was, yes, absorbed back into this group as a team.
So adding to their level of effort.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
So this is predominantly focused at the elementary level. Is that where the need is?
Yeah, so that's where the need is right now.
Okay.
Again, as we see these kind of bigger groups move through, it's possible that we get to a point where there is a bubble at the junior high where we need to consider adding or allocating FTE there as well. The difference at the junior high is that scheduling is a little bit more cut and dry. Everyone is moving at the same time. Class periods are always the same length. And it's just a little bit more predictable when your sixth graders are going to need ELA. It's going to be a certain set of periods in the day. So that does help a little bit with making sure that we can have the appropriate amount of FTE at each grade level.
Okay, I think that's helpful context. So should I, as you're talking about, I'm kind of looking through some of these things here about like graduating fifth graders, incoming early learners on this one, and seeing more of the, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, the incoming kindergarten cohort, we already know that there's a higher need than historically. So would it, do we tend to see most of this happening in that elementary level and it's identified, whereas new cases at a junior high or like even a high school level would be more like already identified? Am I thinking about it?
That is a really good question. It is pretty typical if there is a significant need that a student has, it's going to be identified earlier on in their school career. If it's something that really is impacting them across their day and on a pretty consistent basis. Obviously, it's not exclusively. We certainly do identify new challenges and disabilities and additional needs for students in junior high, but the number of initial evaluations tends to be higher in that elementary level, just because it's, the first time we're kind of getting a look at these students as learners. And so we are doing more of that identification in that setting. With the incoming early learners, those students that are incoming are students who are already identified as having IEP within our preschool program. So, we receive students from early intervention, and then they maintain, they're evaluated and then can receive speech, OT, PT, developmental therapy, but it's really student skills and being in a classroom. They can receive those services in an IEP within our preschool program, and so we just know from our current preschoolers, we have a big group in general going to kindergarten next year with and without IEPs. But the students who currently have IEPs in place and are receiving a variety of services, we anticipate that for many of them that need will continue to some degree. That's the kind of piece that we obviously can't forecast exactly, but we can kind of project out of, here are the skills they're working on now, here's what we would anticipate they're going to be accessing in kindergarten. And it's a big group with a complex set of needs that they're going to be working with our student services team and our kindergarten teacher teams to meet.
Yeah, so assuming all of those students stay in the district and we have zero movement, which will not happen, that will eventually bleed into the 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And so in the future, there might, that's, as you're talking about continuing to monitor needs, that's kind of the trajectory that you're thinking here, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes, yeah. And that being said, I also, that I've never, in my career, I don't know that I've had a bubble continue from kindergarten through all the way through elementary school, kind of unchanged or not significantly moved around, not just because of people moving in and moving out, but because for many of our students, the hope and the goal is if we are providing services so early in preschool and kindergarten, that we are able to taper off, that we're building skills that then would kind of close the gaps in at least some of the areas they're working in, if not all, so that we can dismiss students from IEPs, which also happens both at elementary and junior high. I was in a meeting today where we're saying, they've closed the gap, they've built these skills, they've got this level of ability now that they're showing independently, and so they're coming off of a caseload.
Yeah, I asked all that. I'm in full support of this because I've lost count of how many families I've talked to around just thinking they need these, have these plans, get on these plans, how to navigate this stuff, and then I just always think about the teachers, especially at the elementary level, with just everything they have on their plate, and this in addition to it, and as you've articulated here, just the variety and complexity or not, it really is all over the board. So. I agree with your assessment here, and I'll just state that I'm in support of that and continuing to monitor it as well.
On slide 6 of the 7, you're mentioning something I'm not quite sure I understand, where you're talking about returning to homeschool.
Yeah.
So are these homeschool students, is what you're saying? Who
I'm sorry, I was talking. I missed that second half of your question.
So so when you're talking about students returning to their home school, are these homeschool students in particular? Or what homeschool are they returning to? I guess I'm not clear on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Their homeschool, that's a term, like their neighborhood school, the school that they would go to, if they were a student without an IEP. I'm talking about students who have IEPs in place that for a period of time required them to attend a more specialized school, whether that's a LADSI program or a therapeutic day
okay.
school or something that required more support than we could provide within our home schools. That is a confusing term. That's our neighborhood schools, our elementary schools, Ames, Blythe, Central, et cetera. We talk about a student going back to their home school as their neighborhood school. So a student who maybe was at Blythe and then spent some time getting more support at a different school is coming back to his home school or her home
Okay.
school, which is Blythe.
I think I understand that a little more now. All right. So, and then in terms of, well, just a question. And if we were to extend an offer to an FTE, I mean, are there good candidates? Are there viable candidates at this point in time in the year? And is that someone that would be viable retaining from that point forward?
Yeah, that is a great question. We are hopeful that there are students who graduate in December from teacher prep programs. So that is always an option that we would hope that posting at this point would be attractive to someone who typically December graduates, in all honesty, are looking at maternity leaves for the spring semester or some way to start mid-year. So this would be an option. And if we did hire someone, they would be evaluated as any other teacher. So, we would move that through that evaluation process and make sure that they were getting support and feedback that they need to thrive in this position. It is, I certainly can't guarantee. I know we saw last year with the EL teachers that it can be difficult to find staff mid-year. The other piece I will say about hiring special education teachers, is that there are teachers who work in private schools that are special education focused schools who are not always on the same kind of contract that a public school teacher would be on. So there is a little bit more flexibility and ability to move within the school year than a general education teacher working in a public school.
Okay. Well, also, I guess, now I understand your point. I understand what you're saying in terms of it's hard to nail down, like, we have X number of students, therefore we need X number of special ed teachers. I guess that it kind of worries me to a degree if we're talking about we have 10 special ed teachers, and I think at one point I saw 2015 mentioned. So basically, the past 10 years we've had the same staff of special ed teachers for elementary school students. We're looking to increase that by 20%. And I guess these are pretty sticky positions, especially if we don't have any kind of cohort or factor to figure out if our enrollment drops, then we go down to 11. Yeah, essentially once we've gone to 12, we're going to stay at 12, I would imagine. Is that correct?
I'm never one who's going to be trying to create a need that we don't have, or be looking to kind of oversell a need. I think given the trends that we see in terms of, especially post-COVID, of increasing evaluations, increasing percentages, and this is nationwide, it's not just within Riverside.
Sure.
Used to be, you would typically say about 13% of students within a school are students with IEPs. That number has been creeping up before pandemic and certainly since, to now it's closer to 15. So I think there is a genuine increased need that I don't think we have a lot of data to show that that's going to go back down. But that being said, obviously we can't, we can't predict with 100% certainty. I think another factor that we've seen that has contributed to that increase in IP minutes and kind of the number of students and number of different needs that we are meeting, this is more specifically post-pandemic. And again, it's across, it's not a Riverside specific phenomenon, it is across my previous district and other area districts, is an increase in parent requests for evaluation for special education supports or Section 504 supports. And so I think there's, in general, just a greater understanding across all of our kind of stakeholders of this is a resource that schools have. And so as a parent, I'm going to access that to a greater degree than maybe I had previously. And so again, that is a pattern that doesn't seem like it's a blip. It seems like it's ongoing. So I think it may be likely that we maintain an increase or this increased FTE, but I don't think it's likely that we maintain it just because we have it, if that makes sense. Like, I think there is a legitimate need that we can see has been growing and growing consistently, not kind of, oh, this is just a really big year. And
I'll just interject too, and I don't know if this gets to some of your questions. So, part of Nora's job, Nora's role is obviously to monitor these caseloads and to sort of make sure we're appropriately staffed, and that's where this recommendation comes from tonight. But the school district always has the right to RIF employees. It's something we do not do with any frequency because we have looked at either a growing enrollment overall or a very stable enrollment when we know other neighboring districts might be seeing a decline. So there are things like a decline in enrollment or a significant decline in a special education population or significant decline in a EL population where we may say we no longer need these specialized staff members, and then they would be subject to RIF. Again, I don't want to say that and sort of alarm people because in my 9 years we've never had to RIF anybody, and we've only added to our staffing, as you know. So
We're only increasing staff by, the request is only 10%, not 20%.
10% this year, and then another 10 the next year.
Well,
It's not listed here,
right,
but I
but
think it was
we're
said
going to
that
monitor
it's
so we
strong.
don't, I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to assume, I mean, I'm going to wait for her, like Nora or the school to come, like the leadership to come to us saying that. We don't know at this time. So right now,
right.
I think Nora said it well. I think the trends, everything we see nationally and even sort of regionally, is that these are not numbers that are going down. I will also add this is not that different than our EL conversation in that these are highly specialized educators that are also really sort of critical and identified in the teacher shortage area. So I know Nora's hopeful about a December grad or somebody who might be willing to come back to the workforce or change from a private setting. But we will see. And, we know with EL, it really took us through the summer period to get teachers who then could leave from a different district or a different position to come to us.
I think I don't know 100% what goes on the special ed side of IEPs, but seeing it from the other side and how much work and how much like the unbelievable expertise that our special ed staff has, and how much of an impact it makes on the kids and how much they grow, I think is phenomenal. And I pledge to support whatever special ed needs, because I think if they're feeling stretched, I'm not surprised. And I think, as you said, like we're more, I don't know if it's like our generation of parents, us as parents or whatever, we're more, we try so hard to rally behind our kids and make sure that they have all the things that they need to succeed. And I think I think we do such a good job of that it would be amazing to add another whatever they need to continue to do the great work.
Yeah, not special education specifically, but just this is sort of an area that I pay close attention to outside of the school table, and it is going to do nothing but increase over time.
Yes.
And I don't mean this in a negative way, but this is a resource I think we've needed for a while.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's on the table, which is why I say I 100% support it. Just all of the statistics show this going up. And I think to your point, Marlo, I think as more research and education and awareness of what things are, like just thinking about, I recently had this conversation with somebody, and they were talking about Ritalin, and it's like, you know, when I was a kid, it was the kid that couldn't sit still, just give them some Ritalin, they're fine. But, you know, 20, 30, 40 years later, it's like, oh, this is a thing that actually is rooted in some science, and maybe we should pay attention to it. And I just think with COVID in particular, mental health awareness, behavioral issues, things like that have really popped and exploded, maybe even. So I think what I'm hearing you say, Nora, is like you're seeing a lot of the same things even before COVID, and we're continuing to see that growth. So I don't think this is going to, it just doesn't feel like this is something that's going to slow down, because we're more aware of what the issues are more than anything else, I think. Whether they turn into IEPs and 504s, that, you know, I'm not necessarily saying that, but I just think the general awareness out there is much bigger around the science of some of this stuff than I think what we really realized over the last few decades.
Yep.
Hi Nora, it's Selena. I'm also supportive of making sure we adequately resource your efforts. Just sort of a random question. When we are testing for proficiency and growth, and like that's in the IAR testing, are students with IEPs identified as a subgroup?
They are, yeah.
Yeah. So like if you go and sift through the data, you can see specifically how our IEP students are doing relative to other. Okay.
Right. We can look at them as their own entity, depending on, again, the like we might not be able to get down to grade level if it's in one of our smaller schools, if there's not enough students to make up that cohort without being identifying, but for the most part, yes, we can look at, how are our, how is that subgroup performing on the IIR. We obviously, we take it with an extra grain of salt, because it doesn't let us delineate within that subgroup of students who are receiving more of that resource and push-in support, maybe around a specific small area of need versus students who are coming out of the classroom for a replacement curriculum and moving, just needing more support and kind of building skills from previous years still. So it doesn't let us break out that subgroup based on are they accessing the same curriculum or not, but we are able to look at that growth.
Got it. And just by all of the schools being recognized as either commendable or exemplary, is it right to assume then that our IEP subgroup is not underperforming in a meaningful way?
Not in an alarming, alarming way. Again, we are able to see that growth, and we understand even when we see growth that because the group represents such a wide range of IEP needs, it's not. It's hard to kind of pull out or consolidate that all into one number, because some students may be making significant growth, some other students might not be making as much growth, and so we're really we certainly keep an eye on that as a subgroup within the IAR, but within our special ed teachers, our caseworkers work per se, they're much more tuned into how are they doing on math or on more meaningful assessments and tools that they're using on a daily progress monitoring basis, so that they can show that growth over time versus it's a harder measure, harder metric that IAR for a lot of our students.
Yeah, okay, I get that. And I wasn't trying to make a point around we're doing fine, so we don't need more resources. Like I said, I'm
no, I didn't interpret it as that. I'm just
I'm fully supportive of this.
Talk for an embarrassing amount of time about IIR and testing and what's useful and what's meaningful.
Yeah, I get that. There's probably limited. It has limited use sometimes when trying to evaluate this. So I appreciate that. Okay, yeah, I mean, like, my view is that if we can speed up the speed of service to meet the needs of our students. I know once a parent makes a request for this type of evaluation, there's a certain amount of time by which the school needs to respond, and
Yeah.
and so if we can respond quicker and get students the resources they need in a faster way, because we have the proper, we're properly staffed, I'm very supportive of that.
Yeah, and I, just in full transparency, I can't promise that this will shorten or enhance that response time or shorten it dramatically, but I can say that it will allow us to make sure that we're staying within those timelines that are part of that legal process that's a part of IDEA and that the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. And it will ensure that we're able to do that without having teachers regularly give up their plans or their lunch or other things that contribute to feeling burnt out, because they are, as all of our staff are, a group of high achieving, really eager to do their job and do it well. But we know that we also need to attend to the fact that they need time to plan in the day, and they need to eat lunch during the day and meet those basic needs as well. And so I think that's the other piece that this will make sure we can be consistent on this.
Okay, thank you.
If there's clear enough direction on this, what we would do is go ahead, I think we did this with the EL positions, you go ahead and post it, and so it's possible your formal approval of it could be a person being on the personnel report, could be a candidate being recommended for the position. We can also bring it to, I think we should bring it to the November 20th board meeting either way. Ideally, we'd potentially have a person. I don't know if that's very realistic. That's only 2 weeks away and we haven't even posted it. But does that sound good, Nora?
So you're very optimistic.
That sounds great, and I welcome your criticism.
That's, I know, very, very optimistic.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Nora. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're feeling better.
Thanks.
All right, and I am going to, before we get into policy and facilities, excuse this group here, that we'll be back here bright and early tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all your hard work, too. All right. It's interesting, IEP is on here, but not 504, so it's kind of interesting. They call one out, not the other.
They don't
Okay.
necessarily have the same direct services.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so that brings us to policy committee. Ms. Gunn was not able to be here tonight, so we've got, let's see, I guess the IASB thing is up first before the press policy thing. So we have, I brought the printed sheet that I got from Kathy over here, gave it to me a couple weeks ago. Hopefully everybody had time to at least skim through it, or if there was interest in here. I called out a couple things at the last meeting that just might be of interest to us. I didn't personally have anything to oppose either the adopt or not adopt recommendation, but wasn't sure if there was anything that anybody wanted to talk about going forward with that. And then I think we need to nominate officially, I think we need to nominate a delegate, is that right? Like, we need to vote on who's gonna be the delegate. And I think you're not able to attend, and I'm trying to think, you're Dan, when you gone, Marlo, me, possibly Stephanie, you, Joel? Possibly. Okay, possibly. Were there, I guess, one, we needed a delegate, and two, did we want to have an opposing opinion, I'll say, on any of the recommendations from the IASB?
None of the items that were recommended, I think they all seem fairly reasonable. The big one, I think, that's going to cause a fair amount of stir is the TIF. But that's, I am fully in support of that one simply because TIFs have become, I'm not thinking the right words here, I apologize. TIFs have become rather controversial in terms of the amount of funding that they end up reserving for special uses rather than allowing the tax money that's generated by a property to just go into the general pool of money available to municipality adjacent agencies, and I would count us as a municipality adjacent. What I mean is TIF money is supposed to be, TIF money is money that is, it's tax money that is generated due to additional development, and it's supposed to be reserved for essentially capital improvements or economic improvements within a community. But what it means is that that additional tax money does not go to the adjacent agencies, meaning the libraries or the schools or the county or what have you. And so you're seeing everybody else, all the other properties in a taxing district have to kind of pick up the slack. And there was actually some discussion recently on the legislative side to increase, another item is TIFs have a timeline that they're active and they're supposed to expire after a certain number of years. And I believe there's a current attempt to increase that timeline, so that's even more of an opportunity for the tax money not to go to.
But also the TIFs, though, they also, even though they have a timeline, they can renew that timeline.
Yeah, absolutely,
So
but there's to both increase the timeline and add to them. So that's one I definitely think we should adopt. The others seem fairly reasonable.
I would completely concur with you on that. TIFs, in my previous, life, did probably more research on TIFs than I really want to. But they're so prone to abuse that we should, I completely agree that we should support this one.
You do hear that, it seems like TIFs are often associated with Chicago, though.
But
we have them here.
Oak Park we have Brookfield has them, Oak Park has them. Oak Park is,
They were discussed here in Riverside, but I don't think they passed, and I don't think we have any current ones. I know Brookfield has them on specific you have a TIF district and you can have specific properties that are within that district. And I know I believe there's one in Brookfield that has 4 properties in it, and they're not even contiguous properties. City of Chicago is probably a better example. I think this is just generally good for tax policy. It probably doesn't affect us very much unless, I don't think Riverside's in danger. They don't have any proposed right now, but they have been proposed in the past.
Riverside, though?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so, but the mall is always a potential.
I think it would be apparent, because aren't they TIF profits or excess reverts back to those agencies, particularly the school district?
No, what the TIF does is essentially, let's hypothetically say you start a TIF now, property taxes are $10,000. As property taxes increase, so property taxes in 5 years are $20,000, that $10,000 goes back to the TIF for development. However, the schools and all the districts is still at that $10,000 mark. So
From
everything
that property.
Right, on that property, so so everything in excess of that goes straight back to the TIF. And that money then can be used for
Capital improvements, economic development, what have you. I know that
quote, unquote, economic improvements. So
Oak Park, I don't know the details, but I know Oak Park
I can tell you the details.
had a the Oak Park one?
Yeah, I know.
I know there was a provision where the school district cut a deal with the village
Right.
to pull a redeveloped property out of the TIF to allow all that tax money to be distributed via normal purposes. Is that accurate?
Well, that might have happened after I left, but there was Oak Park has had 3 TIF districts, I believe.
Oh, yeah, what I was talking about is more recent.
Oh, yeah, so they had 3 TIF districts. It was just, they use it for a lot of things that, in my opinion, were not necessarily for economic development. So,
Well, I'm in agreement with it. In fact, I didn't have an issue with any of their recommendations. If anyone else did. We need to figure out who would be the representative.
Who wants to do it?
wasn't Stephanie at last time? Well, she's not here.
No, I was it, and then
Oh,
you
you
two
were?
convinced me to skip it.
It's on the Sunday morning, right?
No, it is actually on Saturday,
Oh,
and I
Saturday.
think my issue was the seminar. There was a couple seminars because it's like this whole thing, and we weren't opposing anything.
Oh.
So I ended up going to a seminar that I felt was probably more valuable than voting on stuff to support things that were probably going to get supported anyway. So I'd be happy to do it again since I didn't have the opportunity to do it last year, although I haven't fully gone through all the seminars again this year either. I probably will do it just because I kind of agree just generally. I haven't done as much research as you have, Dave, on the TIF stuff, but I generally think it's good tax practice. And number 6 on here is the polling place thing that we've been itching to try to get approved at the state level too, so we don't have to close school yesterday. So I'd be happy to do it, but I don't need to do it. Sounds like because I spoke up.
Yeah, I'm not going to object if you wanted to.
I nominate Wesley.
Yeah, all right.
So Stephanie's not going into the
I think she registered. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, right?
I think, yeah. So Joel's up in the air, Selena's out of town. And I think the rest of you guys were in. The
Registered,
last
right,
count
Kathy?
was.
I think your name badges came in today. And
Yep,
did a
everybody should
good
have their
job
name
with
badges.
it.
We got
that
it
are
right here.
registered.
Oh, I should just look at the folders. Okay, yep. All right. Okay, do we need a formal vote on that, or do we just need like the agreement? Like it's not a resolution or
Nope,
anything
I'll
like
just
that,
go
right?
ahead and
Okay,
register
all
you
right.
as a delegate then.
Okay. All right. I'll do it this time, for real this time.
Thank you.
Okay, that moves, and there's a link here for the conference if you guys want to dive in there, easy access for it. So that's A, that's B, and C is Press Plus 116. So I'll hand it over to you to talk through since you've done all the research on this for us.
Sure, this is the first reading for Press Policy 116, which really relates to updated Title IX policies. And Stephanie and I have talked about these a few times. I know we had shared the webinar, if any of you had had additional interest or wanted to dig in on that. It's interesting because the language changes are not as significant. Really what these policies represent is sort of an extension or expansion of the grievance procedures to address all what they consider as all Title IX sex discrimination complaints and not just complaints of sexual harassment. So it extends that, and it does create some language changes to include discrimination on the basis of sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, pregnancy-related conditions, sexual orientation, and gender identity. It also just creates some flexibility around some of the grievance procedures. Policy 2260 specifically contains, similar to some of our other policies, it really integrates a lot of the procedural pieces into the policy language, and wanted to point that out to all of you. But again, first reading, and so I don't know if there's specific questions that people have. These wouldn't be scheduled for approval until the November 20th board meeting.
It looked to me like things were getting removed more so than added.
I think there's some flexibility, I think like a single investigator for the grievance or the complaints.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that when it said something about the person that investigated is allowed to have a decision, which felt weird that they wouldn't if
Yeah.
they did all the investigations or something, so.
And I think that is an attempt to simplify the
Okay,
process.
yeah, so it felt like.
And there was that last one that was related to, well, the policy itself is teen dating violence prohibited, but then it seemed to be talking about life-saving
Yeah.
techniques, so I wasn't quite.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, I was curious about that one too.
And then there's a default of no or yes, I guess. I wouldn't know enough right now to say whether we should say no or yes on this.
This was the, And I thought we had talked about this under a different, like under 115 maybe, but it's the CPR one. Like, do we want to have, it's add the paragraph, an opportunity shall be provided for all staff members to acquire, develop, and maintain knowledge and skills necessary to properly administer life-saving techniques, which didn't feel like it really fit with teen dating violence. So I don't know if that was just
Okay,
a board
yeah.
book blip or.
Is that I'm not seeing it in.
It's the
It's
last
in-
one listed.
In
So
board book, but not
7185.
In board book,
necessarily.
on the
Yeah,
actual
I think
policy.
this is just incorrect compared to the.
Yeah, because, let me do a double check, because I have the hard copies in front of me. And the last one, teen dating violence.
My first thought that was related to, I think it was something we talked about under 115. And we elected no because we didn't. Okay.
I'm not seeing that in the
Where are you seeing it?
full
Sorry.
agenda report.
Which one?
No, like the one I do
Under
use the
policy
PDF.
7185, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So in the agenda, there's a blurb under it,
Yeah.
7185, and then we have all this, and then the policies down here.
So when I'm reading the actual policy, is there a place on the actual
No,
policy
that's
that
why
you're
I think
referring
it's.
to? Okay.
No,
okay.
just in board books. I don't think it fits there, but I had the same question as Dan, like, is that something that we're supposed to be addressing? Because it just didn't feel like it fit.
Why am I not seeing it in board? Oh, in the,
It doesn't show up on the PDF under that policy.
Correct.
Right.
It's just in the board book version where it's pulled out and posted for us. Like, I'm in the quick view if that, I don't know, maybe that makes a difference.
I wonder if it does, because I'm not finding it.
Okay.
I do think it's an error. Kathy, will you take a look at that?
I'm not seeing it, but I will definitely look into it.
Okay. All right, because I don't think CPR is meant to be part of that policy.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
A couple of these, so I always try to do a side by side with it, and this might be to Dan's point. Like, a couple of these say rewritten, but then when I look at them, it doesn't feel like they've been rewritten. So how do I interpret
So
rewritten?
policy 2260, and Kathy was great helping me, and Stephanie, I've talked about this a couple times. Policy 2260 was one of those policies where we deviated from the press plus policy recommendations. And
Okay.
Franzik Law Firm at the time rewrote the policy. And again, made it more thorough. I know even Stephanie brought up, she goes, I feel like I don't want to end up with the one where we had around chronic absenteeism where the press plus policy didn't go far enough. So press plus takes your perhaps customized policies, of which we have very few where we've really deviated from press. But then they revise from your previously agreed upon policy as opposed to sort of going back to like, hey, we recommend every district have the same policy. So what you have in your packet, does Kathy, do they all have this? I guess I have it in my hard packet is press plus revisions, then there's a press sort of basic overview of the 2260.
No, I believe in the board book it's
Just the press plus, okay.
Press plus.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I'm not seeing. Okay, all right.
So this was like taking a customized policies from 2020 and updating it based on our previous customizations to it, if that makes sense.
It does. And then, so are we backing off something that was more stringent, or we're just to be uniform, or we feel like this is a better version than what we had?
I don't think we're backing off anything.
I guess from reading at the delta appears to be removing something, point number 2 of Title IX of the Education Amendments, excluding it, just removes something that references back to Title IX. And that seems to be the only change.
Okay.
And I guess there are a couple footnotes, but they seem to relate back to the same thing. Well, Equal Pay Act and Equal Credit Privacy Act get removed.
Okay. As I was looking at them, it didn't seem like anything had really changed.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
wonder
why was
if
just
that
trying
number 2, the red, the Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 comes off because it's now an amendment, not from the 1972. Like, I just wonder if it's sort of a historic reference that is no longer the most current, but
Okay.
I guess the other two footnotes that are removed seem to be removed and added.
I think because they're updated.
yeah, I will tell you, we've probably spent a lot of time between Stephanie and I and the attorney going over this one. And even again today, just making sure that we were as clear as we could be on this one.
Yeah, I don't think they're updated, they just seem to
They're
be-
not updated. I just
they're removed
realized
and added, and the text is exactly the same.
they're moved because they weren't in numerical order.
Oh, is that what the problem is?
It's
Oh.
820, ILCS 70, and
Okay, I get it.
112, and then there's a 180 right below it, and before 70 and 112 were below 180. That's all they did.
Alright. We were
We
gonna
know
do
what
one
lawyers
other
do for a
side-by-side analysis with Press and Press Plus on this, and so if there's any additional changes, we would bring them to the next meeting before they would be approved. And then the board could either wait and read it again and vote on it later, or just vote and approve all of them.
Okay. Is that a question or is that a statement?
That's a statement.
Okay, all right. Okay. Any other questions at this time on the policies before us? Okay. With that, I'm just kind of doing a time check. It's kind of getting to that 2-hour mark. And we've got two things that we do need for potential recommended action, and then the rest of these, I think, could be punted based on a little back and forth you and I did, so we can just kind of feel it out from where we're at, depending on how long these other two go. But for facilities, Joel, I'll kind of kick it over to you for the main things being Ames Boiler and Blythe Park windows, just because those have longer lead times. The rest of it, we can punt that conversation to later, because they don't have the long lead times that Ramesh is concerned about, I think is kind of the
Yeah, well,
short
and
version.
we were punting those other three, at least for a vote.
Yeah, at least for a vote. So we can see if we have the stamina to talk about those tonight or not. But why don't you jump into the first two since we're looking
Let's
through.
just, do we want to start with the two that need the vote?
Yeah,
And then if we feel like it, we can go back to the advisory committee information. So Blythe Park Windows is an item for approval tonight. And basically 10 years ago, we did some work on the windows. We did an applique or an overlay on top of the old windows. And that was an attempt to both save some money and try and retain the existing architectural feature. That has reached the end of its lifespan. They're still having issues with some glass cracking, I believe, Martha. Basically, they're single pane windows. They tried to make them double pane with this overlay, and now we've run the clock out on this, and so they're believed to be in need of replacement. DLA is going to propose a similar architectural window as was put on the addition a few years back, and they would then have to present that to Preservation Committee for the village. And it's on today's agenda because they need to get going, because that's a special, windows are, need to be fabricated, and that takes time.
but I think we do officially need approval from the,
Preservation.
Yeah.
is it the
Oh,
preservation?
yes,
we do,
we absolutely would, but
which was December. Trying to find
I
that in the
thought it was
memo.
November 18th, actually,
it
was the
November?
next meeting. So that's part of it.
Okay.
If we approve this MOU with DLA, that then gives them the opportunity to get in front of preservation on the 18th.
So we're just paying for the architects tonight.
For the architects, this is $88,200, I believe, for their fee. Just so everybody knows,
So, wait, so if this is an action item, should we propose it?
Oh, we will need to propose.
I want to make sure people actually want to vote on it
Okay.
first, because it's kind of a last minute kind of talk about it and vote on the same night thing. So I first wanted to make sure people were comfortable voting, then I was going to open it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I've probably said enough at this point. We have Blythe Park, windows are in need of replacement, DLA needs to be advanced, or the contract needs to be approved so that they can get in front of preservation quickly enough so that they can then work on their plans and proposal for an actual construction contract.
Yeah. So to Dan's point, tonight would be essentially approving the project, but not the dollars for the windows. It'd be the dollars for the architect so that they could get moving, and then we would have a formal bid approval process later,
Correct.
estimated to be around $919,000.
Just under $1 million.
yeah.
So this project will cost, it's estimated by Ramesh, all told around $1 million.
So how many windows are we talking here?
$1 million worth of windows.
Should we hold the discussion now?
Do we want to open it?
Basically, if you look at the building,
Yeah,
if you look at Blythe, you have all of the auditorium, so both sides of the auditorium. And then, Martha, are there 5 or 6 classrooms on each side, and each classroom is a full wall of windows.
Right.
So you're talking, I'm not gonna try and go on Street View or something, but 5 times, so possibly 40 or 50 windows per classroom.
Okay.
Plus, it wouldn't surprise me if there were another 100 on each side of the auditorium. Plus, there's 3 sets of windows that face the south parking lot. So
we're talking windows, not like this type of window. So each
no,
pane is a
no.
window.
I'm calling these each windows. These are casement windows.
Okay.
They're essentially casement windows.
Okay,
They're metal framed
that makes
windows.
a little bit more sense. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
say 50 panes of glass per classroom.
All right.
And is it typical that a project like this would require an architect to begin with, and then an architect fee of the amount that they're proposing?
I thought about that, and the architect is essentially managing the project as well. That's what the MOUs do. I had some doubts about some of the fees, so I went back to the Capital Improvement Board, which is an Illinois state agency, and I looked at their recommended fee ranges for this kind of work. The Capital Improvement Board basically they divide work into categories 1, 2, and 3. If you give me a moment, I'll pull up the PDF.
I think, well, I don't
mean,
want to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like your question was, do we need an architect? Period?
Yeah, that's the first question.
Yes,
Do we need an
to
architect?
develop the contract plans, yes.
Okay. And then the second question is this fee reasonable?
Yeah, that was actually my question as well.
I mean,
88,000.
And the same question for the boiler.
Yeah, that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so, yes. Sorry, I'm trying to pull.
And is this something that like we automatically go with DLA because they're our architect of record, or is this something that also could be put out for bid?
Professional
like this.
services, you don't put out for bid, you select the purveyor and then you negotiate with them.
That's sounding like for this one, we need the architect, whoever it may be, to start presenting this to the preservation board, like in a couple weeks.
Yes, here,
I mean, assuming we're going to vote to do it, yes.
Assuming we would vote to do it.
Because the windows need immediate care?
They need to be, the contract documents need to be advanced in time so that we can do a bid for
It's
summer
lead time, right?
construction.
'Cause I would assume this
It's
work
the
would be done over
lead
the
time,
summer.
it's the lead time to fabricate the windows.
I'll ask that a different way. Does it have to be done now? Can we delay? I mean, I heard you say the windows are cracking, and I get that it's not energy efficient and stuff like that, but I think,
We
Just to throw
could
that out there.
probably push it by a year.
I don't know.
Not
that-
going to be a great crisis. I mean, what you would end up doing is if we have a window that can't be replaced, or it's gonna have a piece of plywood over it, and that's
Yeah.
probably one or two windows, possibly. I'm
I don't
just,
think the preservation committee would like that.
It's happened, I mean,
that's
these
not
windows
even,
have been cracking for some period of time.
their opinion on that is, I would say, is not relevant.
Yeah.
If we have to have something on an interim basis for some period of months, if we delay till 26,
Yeah.
then that's a minor risk. Is it insurmountable? Is it unsafe? I would say no. We're not creating an unsafe situation.
And this is again, not because of an emergency or, this is really, we sort of scoped out long-range maintenance needs a number of years ago. And so boilers, windows, roofs, like we're all sort of,
I guess-
So that was
calendared
good.
out so that we
Right.
could manage the expenses.
So that was going to be my question then, so has this been budgeted for?
Now, Jim has a page later on that says we're looking at, with the program that was in the capital improvement plan for 2025, it's about $2 million worth of work.
We're kind of
All
killing
these
both of
pieces.
these.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not arguing that those windows need to be replaced. I mean, I guess I'm just, the architecture's fee just seems high.
If you give me,
So go ahead.
And it seems
Like I
even
said-
higher for the-
I think, was this the one that when you and I were talking about planning, that I think we had talked about this, and I asked a couple items on like the budget and things like that. And I think, I wanna say this was where Ramesh had already negotiated down, and like, he felt like this was as low as we were gonna get.
no, that
Or
was
was that a different one?
that was the sewer.
That was the
No,
sewer.
but Ramesh does, so just from a process point of view, so facility advisory, which is Joel and David, take a preview look at these things, talk about it in committee. Ramesh, working as our owner's rep, has typically been with DLA before or after or again to really negotiate. And Ramesh has been very clear with us, with both of us at different times, well, no, this fee is too high. Security infrastructure upgrade was one in particular that we were really looking at, what's the appropriate architecture fee on that one, so.
Yeah, you've negotiated the settlement a few times.
Yeah.
So I will ask the Jeff Miller question. So would these windows open?
No, that's direction we would give to the architect. I would assume, I realize that's a big thing, but based on what we did at Hollywood, that we would absolutely insist that we have the ability to open them. They open now.
Okay.
I think it depends the width, the big floor to ceiling
They're not big floors, they're a series of
parts and
panes.
parts, yeah.
So you flip open one pane at a time, and just certain ones, they're not all openable.
I just want to go back to understanding the process around always using DLA. Like, are we, because they're our service provider of record, are we committed to using them?
We
Like,
do
are-
not have to use them forever. We could choose to reject DLA and do a RFP to interview new architects.
So then I think that answer is yes.
Right.
We need to use DLA because they're our architect. And if we don't want to use DLA, if
For
we want to use somebody
professional
else.
services,
And we're only allowed to have one architect.
I don't know the rules around that, to be
Yeah.
honest.
I believe.
They
I feel
all
like
pretty much are
especially-
gonna have similar fee structures.
Yeah, but like if we are in a position where we can put things out to bid because we have multiple architects that we can go to, and yes, like we have a lot of comfort with DLA because we've worked with them a lot, but we're making sure that we're getting the best
The best
deal
service.
and the best
You-
service,
you
right?
don't
So like, it just it seems like it's always DLA, and I just want
We-
to make sure that there's a good reason why it's always DLA.
We pick a professional service provider. You do not negotiate fees. You don't negotiate ahead of time. We could negotiate now with them. We could ask Ramesh to look at their numbers more, but you don't bid out professional services. I guess that's the best way to describe it.
There wouldn't be a formal bidding process, I guess is what you're saying.
No.
We could bring in
That's
two more architects, they could give us their fee. which may
They
or may
would
not be the
they would
same.
bid the project and it
They
would
could
have their
bid
fee
the-
attached,
Yeah.
right?
That's not how you do professional services.
Okay, in
You
my
select a
experience building out
provider.
offices, it is.
I think, yeah.
Because
it
you're
refers to
on.
Policy on this. so we could
Sorry,
select
this is
attorney-
the
yeah,
difference
sorry.
of public versus private.
Okay,
Public.
and I'm just trying to
Yeah,
understand
no, I'm
that.
sorry, I missed one part.
Well, but again, I
Public,
think.
you pick the provider based on qualifications, and then you negotiate the fee afterwards.
I think the issue here, though, is, sounds like that we would have to present this before the Historic Planning Commission, or Historic Commission.
If we want to do it this year.
Yeah.
We could.
So I guess
we
this is, I guess,
Go back.
and Selena, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like there's some concerns about the fees and what have you, and cost, and using DLA all the time. And I can appreciate that. Given that we have something that's come up, I think maybe it's something we might want to consider looking at down the road. But seeing that we have some things that are sort of pressing right now, we just might want to just look at this. I would maybe direct Martha and Jim, if you can go back to the, Ramesh and say, like, the almost $83,000 for, or no, that's the boiler, but like the $88,000 for the windows seems high. And I'd say, if, I know we're not talking about the boiler, but like $83,000 for a boiler, I mean, that boiler is big, but $83,000, I mean, why can't we maybe just manage that ourselves? I guess.
It's,
We
No.
won't do it ourselves, but maybe Ramesh or somebody could do it.
Right, but I mean-
We do not do this stuff ourselves.
No, but I guess the thing is, it's a boiler, it's not,
Yeah, what is the engineering that
Right.
goes into that?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if I think about that,
We've replaced boilers before fairly recently, and I don't know that there was an architect's.
yeah,
Well, so it was
they
part
they
of the
did it as
broader-
part of Blythe Park.
yeah, but that was like all included together though, so I don't know.
They actually,
Fee
for,
was-
sorry, I'll stop.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
We're switching topics now.
Oh,
We
yeah,
are,
yeah,
yeah, we are.
I think to the point of the fees, I would agree with that. Like, it feels high to me, because if I think about it in like people's annual salaries, that is a very generous annual salary to do what? Put in a boiler? Like, I don't know, maybe I'm not thinking about that in the right way. I don't know how intense that work is.
I will,
Is there any historic planning or any kind of commission problems with Ames and replacing a boiler?
here, like I said, I looked at the Capital Development Board. Make sure I'm on the right page. Capital Development Board is an Illinois state agency. They have a document called Centralized Fee Negotiation, Professional Services and Fees Handbook. And a whole bunch of stuff, but they have basically a guidance for professional services. And that includes both what are or are not allowable overhead items or things that you can charge for. And then they also have some tables that speak to recommended fees for certain kinds of work. So for, say, keep messing up here, remodeling, it's a group 3 project. It's just, group 3 includes windows and doors, roofing, tuck pointing, waterproofing, paving, asbestos, retube boilers, ADA. Retube is different from a new boiler, just so you know, fire suppression, sprinklers. And then the latest fee range for a group 3 project that is just under $1 million ranges anywhere from 6.14% to 10.53%.
Okay, so it's a percentage of the estimated
It's a
cost.
percentage of the estimate. And
That's right, it's
look,
always a percentage of the estimated cost.
this kills me because this is not what I do on, professionally. We negotiate differently, but this is how architecture services are done, and it's generally a percentage of the estimated project
Looking
cost.
just short of 10%, roughly.
Yeah.
And the number for that was 9.6%.
And will the 88.2 that we approve, if we approve that tonight, that's already there? Or if that bid comes in at 800, does that go down to whatever 9 point, whatever you just said?
Right now, and this is actually the discussion we could have with DLA, is in the past, say for, just a minute, the Blythe roof, that contract was a certain percentage of the job, but it was to be billed time and materials not to exceed a certain value. The contracts, the MOUs we have in front of us are all lump sum, which means they get paid that amount regardless of what the bid was.
Okay.
Now, if you recall with the central houser work, because the bid ultimately came in so low, they did not charge their full amount. So they did not charge the maximum that our agreement would have allowed them to do.
Okay, and so maybe that's where this flexibility is here. It says for a lump sum fee of 88,200 based upon final estimate from the Stara. So is that where that?
So Ramesh has done an estimate about what these windows will cost, and then they have based their fee on his estimate.
On what they think it is. Okay, all right. I honestly have no idea how much intense work goes into this, so it sounds like they've got some standards backing it up, and I think we end up in the same spot every time we bring this up for DLA. So I think where I would be cautious is I don't necessarily want to have 2 or 3 architects at the table every time. That can get kind of messy and unmanageable, and I think with certain things that we have, like preservation committee, historic committee, all these other challenges, I think we do want somebody familiar with the district that we can partner with. But to your point, like making sure we're not partnering and being overcharged, where's the balance exactly? I think that's a fair question.
Well, it's a very fair question. That's why I started playing around with the spreadsheet.
And Kathy has reminded me that we have policy 2:170, which is the procurement of architects, engineers, and land surveying services. It's very short and simple. It just says we select architects, engineers, and land surveyors to provide professional services to the district on the basis of demonstrated competence and qualifications. And in accordance with the state law, I'm clicking on some of those links. I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't think we've ever really been asked. I do think we contemplated the idea of perhaps more than one architect when we started with the Ames edition. I can tell you this, it's not at all typical, that you typically form a relationship with an architect similar to what you might with an attorney, other professional services, just somebody that then knows your buildings well. So really, DLA has kind of managed for us in many ways, along with Ramesh, this long-range maintenance plan, right? So you're gonna need, by the way, you're gonna need a new boiler at Ames, you know, for sure by 25, right? We know we've been repairing that boiler many times. We do repair the Blythe windows with enough frequency that I know it comes to my attention. I'd actually probably hate to see the Ames boiler wait, just from sort of anecdotally. If the windows, I think if the board felt strongly that they wanted to explore some of these other things, you know, can a district hire 2 architects? I don't know that we're prohibited from it. I don't know that that's the way architects want to sort of work within a school district. I'm happy to explore all of it. You know, it would be sort of some legal research with our attorney and coming back to you with some information.
Yeah, I think, look, like I am not against repairing what needs to be repaired and doing maintenance when it needs to be done. I think the frustration here for me would be that if this was part of a long-range plan, why is it coming to the table now and I'm being asked to decide on it almost immediately if we've been known that this was on the table for a long period of time? And then, secondly, look, I just think that when you run competitive processes, you're more likely to get a better deal. And so to the extent that we're always using DLA and they have a lot of comfort of pushing us up near that 10% when the proper range is somewhere between 6 and 10%, like that tells me, hey, maybe we're not getting the best deal here for our taxpayers. So that's why I'm just curious what the process is and why, you know, the process always just seems DLA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with that. I would also caution partnering and pitting people against each other is different. And so we want to make sure we partner without always
Right.
putting them on their heels and pitting them against somebody else
Right.
to squeeze them for money.
We're not squeezing people for money, we're asking them to be competitive in the marketplace.
So if
That's
I
just
can,
business.
We would ask them to reconsider their fee.
so I guess this is my stance. And I value the relationship we have with DLA. I think they've done a good job. They've served us well. I guess right now I feel like they're somewhat taken advantage of, just because the fees do seem a bit exorbitant for the price. And so I'd like to keep this relationship, but right now I feel like it's like, oh, because we have this relationship, we've had a long time. And I just know how that is. Like, the longer you have a relationship, fees will go up. And so you.
Hey, I've been on board 5 years and I haven't talked to another architect. So
Yeah.
I'm not debating, I'm not
Right.
against
And so I guess
that.
the thing is, to Selena's point, it is like we've known about this. I'm like I said, I'm not. The cost for the windows do seem a bit high. The cost for the boiler does seem high, or the estimated, I should say, the estimated cost, because we don't know. It could be significantly less or more for all we know. I guess the thing is that just the fees that are causing me concern, and I want to move forward with this because I know this has been on. We've talked about this. We knew this was coming. I guess my thing is, let's just, if we can move forward, but not at these fees. We have to reevaluate these fees that they're looking to charge us.
And I'll speak, and I apologize for the timeline, this has happened to us before. By the time we convene facility advisory, preview it, have the board agenda in front of us, we do with some, you know, I don't want to say really, but like Ramesh saying, no, like this needs to go out to bid for early December, and we sort of count backwards, and our last facilities advisory did take us, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks of just trying to get a time on everybody's busy calendar, so I don't like it either when, you know, like, well, then we need the board to approve this now. The board does not have comfort with approving it, don't approve it. You know, I mean, that's, and I don't mean to sound like glib about that at all. I just mean like, you need to be comfortable with this. These are long-range maintenance. They feel important. Could the windows wait? Like Joel, you said another year. I think the windows could wait another year.
Windows could wait.
I don't think the boiler should. You know, I mean, just because we've had days where it's like, are we going to be able to open school today? Because we are patching that boiler together on a cold wintry day. It feels like sometimes.
So I guess the boiler, and I guess the fee for the boiler just seems really high to me.
Yeah, so I don't think
It
we're
does.
debating on, so I think the
Yeah.
timeline issue is like a different topic, because we've had this conversation at least 5 different times since I've been on the board, and it's always the same conversation and then it happens again, so I'm not gonna disagree with any of that commentary. And it feels as though, what I'm hearing is that it's feeling like because of the short timeline, we're potentially being squeezed to agree to a fee that we're too high, but we have to approve it tonight, so we can't negotiate, and so why are we in that bind again? I think we've been talking about the Ames boiler for at least 2 years. I think that's the only thing that kind of sticks with me. I'm fine approving it, and it sounds like these fees are reasonable, so I'm not disagreeing. I'm kind of in the middle on this whole thing. So maybe we need to table the timeline aspect of it and just figure out, like, here's where we're at. Again, I don't know what we do to resolve the timeline thing. Do we need to change our facility advisory process? And, because I know we've got multiple people involved in that. Do we have too many people? Is it not nimble enough? Do we just need to bring things, if you're not available, you're not available, we just bring it to the table to keep it moving? Not what we're here to talk about, but maybe you and I can take that
that's a good point, and I
offline.
think we're not nimble enough. I know I got talking, because it's architects, us, 2 board members, you know, maybe what we do is set up a standing meeting. You know, like it's always the
Could do that.
first Tuesday, you know, whatever it is, and we look at our calendars, and consider that. And then I do think, I mean, I will say, Jim and I both, that Ramesh will push us, right? Like, you're gonna get your best price on a boiler if you get out to bid sooner. I'm sure we can go out to bid in April to get a boiler, right? Like,
Sure.
if that's what we need to do, it's just that he does put pressure on us to say, you are gonna get your best bid price, right? Which
And it's
has
always
also
this
been
time of year, so
very
this isn't a
important to the
surprise.
board, so, yeah, I think those are all good suggestions that we could look at, a more standing regular facility advisory time. And, maybe we have to look at those long-range maintenance items in the summer, publicly with the board as opposed to first to facility advisory. I can think of some process changes there.
So I can share it, even if we just put it under information. Every board.
So I will take that away, convene with you, we'll come back with something in some capacity around that. So I think that is a good conversation. Just to kind of pivot back to what's in front of us, I'm gonna say, let's focus on these two things, and then I totally realized I skipped over the plumbing thing, which was actually 4B here. Let's not talk about the masonry, the low roof, and the security camera stuff, because I'm getting exhausted. It's 9:20. I'm sure everybody else is too. Do you want me to open up a vote on the boiler and on the windows? Either, both, neither?
I think we need to open the vote on the boiler. The windows can wait based on legitimate board commentary.
Let me ask this question first. Are both of these items in the current budget for this fiscal year?
We budget 1.1 million every year to do these kinds of things.
Right.
And if we were to do all 5 of these projects, we would spend $2 million more than the budget. But we also know that when we get our audit in a couple months, that we're going to be adding at least that $2 million back to the fund balance. So it's kind of earmarking that profit from last year.
So
to
just
get some maintenance done.
just around, it's about $1 million estimated for the boiler and about $1 million estimated for the windows, and we only budgeted 1.1 million in total.
For all 10 years, we just put 1.1. So if we're pulling it ahead, because maybe it's better to do
Can we
more
change
projects
that
at
process when you guys are doing finance? Because
Well,
if we
how
know these
much-
things are coming, I think we should probably bake those
Yeah.
into the budget.
Well, I mean, are we always spending 1.1 million? So did we underspend it? Or are we overspending it every year?
We usually underspend it because we've been using fund balance for some of these large projects. So now we're getting more to maintenance, we're not doing.
We've been assuming about 1.1 in just regular required maintenance. That's where, that number came out of that 10-year plan that we did a while ago.
It was based on some estimates of real projects over a long period of time, yeah.
Okay, so for future conversation, Hauser masonry, roof replacement, security cameras, and then up to your MOU here, that's a total of 3.1 million, which would theoretically be covered by 1.1 budgeted maintenance and a $2 million waiting for final approval fund surplus. So it's covered, it just wasn't budgeted.
Right, and it would really be next year's budget we'd be paying. And sometimes
Okay.
it would.
Oh, because we would approve it to pay in the next fiscal year, because this work wouldn't be done until the next fiscal year, and then we would put that budget into next fiscal year. That's a helpful
Right.
piece of information.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank
could
you.
you re-explain that?
So we would approve it now, but the work won't be done until the next fiscal year. So we will have it in, whatever we approve tonight, we will put in the budget for next fiscal year.
Remember that we're only,
approving the
the
MOU.
only thing that's in front of us to approve is 2 MOUs. We are not approving this work yet. We
But
don't
these
have
bids are gonna come in January, February, and then we're gonna approve the rest of it.
We could tell them not to go to bid. We could tell them
We
to have
could.
the plans ready and we'll bid it out when we deem appropriate. Deem appropriate is either, a boiler breaking down, then it's no longer biddable, but
Because both of these projects will be done over the summer.
yes.
And
that
so then
was
by the time they're
intent.
done and we pay for them, we'll be past July 1st, most likely, or most of it.
Right, because that's been working out.
Okay. So we're not spending the money now. We're approving the money now. Well, we're approving some of the money
Approving
now.
the idea of it.
We're
the idea of
approving
it now.
the engineering and design fee now.
And the boiler is kind of on its last legs. The windows are getting there, but they could be deferred. So I think we take that into consideration with the roof, which has also been patched up for leaks. The cameras, great idea, maybe not the time for it. Masonry, we can talk about how intense or how immediate that is needed. So just trying to put it all together, but not have to debate it all tonight.
The masonry was really more of a just ongoing maintenance item.
Okay.
That we need to do the facades of, half a building per year to keep up with it.
Yeah, okay.
We could probably revisit the cameras at a later meeting, but that said, we have a limited amount of time of Don's time this year.
Well, I don't
Where I think this is headed, though, is it's probably gonna go out to bid, with your approval, of course, for an organization that would specialize in sort of the wiring and placement of security cameras.
That's why it's so cheap, okay.
Yeah, the 25K was only conceptual design
Yeah,
stuff.
okay.
That was
Probably didn't
not
that
an
one close
actual
enough.
design.
Okay. Boilers and windows are the immediate decision need.
Correct.
Are we comfortable voting and approving? If not, I don't see the point in voting.
I'm comfortable with it.
I'm gonna take silence as a yes.
I mean, look, I feel like I've, if these are things that need to be maintained or replaced, like, how can I not vote for something like that? However, I don't like being in the position that we're in right now. And
I
so
do agree.
In the future, I think having a longer timeline in a review process, so that way we can really evaluate whether the architects are, we're getting a good deal from our architects, I think would be beneficial.
So let me ask this question. Can we approve these to move forward? Because essentially we're just approving the fees, the architect's fees. Can we approve this moving forward, assuming, like, if we go back and say, because the big thing is the historic preservation, right?
For the windows, yeah.
For the windows.
For the windows. And can we approve, like the initial start of, like, the architects, if we just go back to them and say,
We could,
like, we're only gonna pay this up to a max of this, we need to reevaluate these fees.
we could approve with
that
an
they can go to-
addendum that says a not to exceed fee. If that's,
I mean-
but that would be a modification of the MOU, so they'd have
Right,
to agree to
but-
it as well.
It was essential, I guess the thing is. can
Oh,
we send-
yes, you could.
Can we
What
send it
you're
back to, like,
saying.
to negotiate, say,
Yeah.
we want this, you need to take this to historic preservation. Here's, like, some money so you can do it for your time and services, but you need to come back to us because these fees we feel are too high. Does that
We
make
could,
sense?
they could also say, we're not gonna do that.
Right, and then they could say they're not gonna do that, and then, I mean, that's a real possibility. But to the point of, we have a relationship with them, I would hope that they would at least realize that we're gonna be we're operating in good faith here.
Yeah, it's a tricky game, because you've got a fee schedule that they seem to be in line with at the bottom of it, and
We're at the top of it.
are they at the top of it?
They're not, they're around middle.
Around middle, okay. That was towards the top.
It depends on which project.
Okay.
Give me a minute. Sorry, I need to move my spreadsheet stuff around here
If
to see
we
everything.
feel that we want to get the maintenance done, I think we just need to accept it and we battle it
Yeah.
out in the future. And if we don't like what, we've got to do something about the timeline thing. So I'm hearing that again very loud and clear for, I don't know how many times we've had this conversation. So we've got to figure that piece of it out. I don't know that we're going to figure that out tonight. So
No,
I
fair
think we
enough.
need to focus on, do we want them to do the work under the conditions they provided or not? And if not, that's fine, but we are, I mean, I don't know what risk we're running. I mean, I don't think the boiler's in bad enough condition it's gonna blow up. It's just maybe not gonna work.
And real honestly, as I sit here and think, what if it was a month later on the bid, right? Like, so maybe you get your best bids in December, but what if you get good bids in January too? Like, I mean, there's a skill and an expertise that Ramesh and DLA bring to us, right? That I don't purchase boilers
Yeah.
so,
And
yeah,
remember
and
with
I
this-
apologize, we will never, right? I mean, I just feel like we cannot, I say this to Jim and I, but also, we cannot succumb to Ramesh and DLA rushing us. Like, you have all said to us before, it's unacceptable, and here we did it again, I did it again. You know, we bring you an agenda that says, like, here are two things that they say, wow, we wanna get out to bid in early December, so, which means we had to, you know, approve them tonight. And we do push back, right? I mean, I think, you know, Dave and Joel Harrison, Facility Advisory, the board doesn't like this, well, if we don't get out there. And I don't think this is about with Ramesh, I really don't think this is about him trying to.
No, what Ramesh is worried about is the timeline to either fabricate the items in question. I think in his memo he says 12 to 16 weeks to basically create a boiler.
Yeah,
12 to 16 weeks.
Have them in a warehouse. You got to build them.
They're custom made.
The windows are a large order. I don't know that these are on the same timeline, but I know with some of the construction, like the steel plants literally shut down. And all orders are then processed, and you don't get an order in until the next batch. I distinctly remember him bringing that
That's
up. Like,
correct.
if you miss this timeline, you are screwed.
So,
I don't.
but oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, but then they wouldn't have the boiler in place in the worst part of winter, regardless.
Well, you're not.
No,
right,
this won't be
correct.
installed until the summer.
Yeah. We have to get through this winter, and then hopefully over the summer they'll install it for the next winter. So yeah, this isn't.
So we'll limp
So it's
along
not
one
that
more
dire.
winter.
Okay.
Right, yeah. It's not an emergency
dire,
repair, I'm
it's
just
not.
saying it's important.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at the top of the
Well, I
list.
mean, I'm thinking like, I don't want any kids to have to.
That's a risk this winter. I mean, the thing is functioning, but we
Yeah.
know it's got issues.
Yeah.
So is
So
one day.
if we punt it a month, it might cost us $50,000 more for a boiler to save $10,000.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what's going through my mind. I mean, I say let's vote on it tonight, but let's, Joel, maybe next time we talk, we have a serious conversation about these fees, because, especially the boiler just seems, it does not seem all.
Well, perhaps,
that comfortable.
are there any other items with architecture fees on here? Or do all of them have?
don't
No,
know
all when we say architecture fees, we're talking about both the architect and their subconsultant, and they have a subconsultant identified for the boiler replacement. The boiler replacement is not just take the old one out and put the new one in it. It's redesigning the whole system because it's probably 30 years old, and technology has changed.
Oh, so the architects actually designed the boiler itself?
Not the boiler, but
No,
all
sounds like a
all the things that
subcontractor.
go around it. So
Okay,
the
okay.
control system, the piping, does the gas line need to come in a different place?
How to install the boiler?
It's how
Yeah,
to
all right.
install this latest machine. And yes,
yeah,
the
clearly
costs for new
the question
machinery
is-
are absurd.
Yeah.
That's
So
nothing
I guess
we can
the
control.
point being that if we approve these two tonight, then we can go back and say, hey, can we do time and materials on these other projects?
Yeah,
Or
'cause
can
we're
we do
not-
a better rate?
Yeah.
Better
felt-
rate, or honestly, just a not to exceed.
Or a not to exceed, sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives us the flexibility to ask them on these other projects, just not these two.
I mean, we could. I think there's a risk in doing that. But we're not approving any of those others, so yeah, absolutely, we could go back on those.
What's the risk?
We end up spending more money on the materials than we save in the architecture fees?
No, I'm not talking about the two. I'm not talking about the boiler and the windows. I'm talking about like the low roof and the masonry work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think I heard your question wrong. Yes, we can absolutely go back and negotiate those, because that's not on the table for approving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Blythe Playground and whatever other projects are on
Yeah,
the
all
horizon.
future.
Yes.
The Blythe Playground, I'll interject, I mean, we don't have a draft IGA from the village on that one, so that's not a summer of '25 project, that would be
No, it
at
never
best a
was.
summer of '26 project.
I'm so sorry to bring this up, because it hasn't been mentioned in the agenda or anything, but what about the repairs at Hollywood?
Those are, I mean, I'll let you speak to that, Jim, the playground, yeah.
And the
Oh.
fence, and is anything gonna be reconfigured?
Yeah, we call it DLA.
We've ordered the pieces that they're not in a warehouse either, so they'll be coming
Okay.
as fast as we can. I don't,
Oh, no, I think I more meant like in terms of like budgeting and,
it could be a repair, and like any other repair we have.
So at a future time.
But does it require the, DLA, does it require,
They've been assisting us on like the time and materials to, meet with the playground contractor, make sure it's safe for now, and then what we're gonna do to replace other items, so.
Okay, so should we make a motion on these, the two action items, or one at a time?
We do them one at a
We
time.
can do them one at a time. I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with it before voting it. I just don't want to open up something and we just vote it down. We can just do that now.
So right now, Dan, what I hear, I think what I'm hearing is we are willing to approve the boiler and the windows at Blythe, with some additional discussions with DLA on the other items.
I mean, hell,
The-
if they're
the
willing to
general
go down
sense
on
of the
these two, I'll
room.
take that too, but I don't think they will. We've already approved it, so. How about this? How about a conversation about the fees moving forward in general? Inclusive or exclusive of this, if they so feel the need to amend it.
Then we could take a snippet of this debate and send it to them, let them know that we're pretty serious about it.
It's one of the good things about a recorded meeting.
Yeah.
Open it?
If I could have a moment here. Motion to approve the complete boiler replacement design project for Ames Elementary School. Fee, for a lump sum fee of $82,800 based on the final estimate from Vistara.
All right, I'm gonna open it and you can vote it down if you want. Ames boiler replacement. Is there a motion that the Board of Education, based on the memorandum of understanding from DLA Architects Limited, approve Vistara's
It should be recommendation.
recommendation to approve the design services to DLA Architects in the sum of $82,800?
So moved.
Second?
Kathy, can you call the roll?
Okay, Ms. Claps,
No.
Mr. Marhol,
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi,
Aye.
Mr. Hunt,
Aye.
Ms. Kalick,
I,
and Mr. Muirhead.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, Blythe Park window replacement. Is there a motion that the Board of Education, based on the memorandum of understanding from DLA Architects, accept Vistara's recommendation to approve the design services to DLA Architects Limited in the sum of $88,200?
So moved.
Second.
I don't want to second it, don't second it. All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Okay, Mr. Marhol,
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi,
No.
Mr. Hunt,
Aye.
Ms. Kalick,
no.
Ms. Claps,
No.
Mr. Muirhead.
God damn it. Aye. And I think a 3-3
I was
tie
gonna say,
wins,
3-3
right?
tie.
And mainly, I agree with all of the fee discussion. I just want to get it done, and we have the money, and I think we can fight about fees on everything else. All right.
I don't think it's a fight so much as I think that there needs to be proper process.
Sorry, maybe I shouldn't use that terminology. Thank you. Negotiate
Yeah.
fees more timely and appropriately in the future.
And I guess for me, it's the boiler, I think it's an absolute, we have to do it. The windows, as Joel mentioned, can wait a year. So if we don't go before the historic preservation, we can wait a year on that. Not ideal, but.
Right. And that's what I was weighing myself to, so. You're right. Should not have said fight about it, and I did not mean that towards us collectively. I think that was a very good
Oh,
debate.
sorry, I was
Discussion
assuming you
among
meant
us.
a discussion with DLA.
Yeah, I did,
You said
but I
fight.
shouldn't use incendiary language like that.
No, it makes
Negotiate.
me realize, like, we will sort of try to, not try to, we will organize a process around sort of looking at it in the, you know, we've sort of over time evolved through this regular budgeting for maintenance items, bring it forward. I do believe that historically, this is a district that overlooked a lot of maintenance items. We've tried to really build it in to a regular calendar. And I'm sorry if it sometimes feels rushed. We can work on that piece too.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But don't go lose your computer yet.
Yeah.
So I missed
My computer
the.
just went dead. It just.
Oh,
done.
okay. I missed the emergency pipe repair, which I think will be an easier discussion. Joel, do you want to kind of give a? I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Oh,
We did use, it is a different contractor.
I
That was my
I
only-
think I sent an email to Wesley and Martha.
Is there an action item for that?
No, there's no action
Okay.
item. Right now, Jim and Ramesh went and talked to Power Plumbing, and they would not, or still had a very high estimate for the work. And so went back and basically went to another vendor, and that other vendor's number is right around $22,000, I believe, and that is under what we need to vote on. But that work is to replace 150 feet of sewer pipe in front of Central Hauser, and do that, replace the pipe from the face of the building up to the curb line of the street. So almost entirely within our property, not quite because we'd be in the parkway. And then the rest of the pipe was deemed in sufficiently good condition that it does not need replacement, so that got us out of the issue with the manhole. The village believed the manhole was in serviceable condition and was not interested in replacing it at this time, so they said that would have been on our dime. Whether or not that's true or not, we will, for $22,000, we will replace the sewer pipe that is within our purview.
So can I just ask a question then? So the village told us originally that this sewer, the manhole needed to be replaced, and now it seems to be okay?
When pressed, and Jim may need to correct some of my words here, because
Yeah, we had a meeting with the village and with Ramesh.
and the village said that they don't need to spend the money to replace it because it works sufficiently well right now.
But they got it.
Which is why they believe that this leaking or damaged sewer on our end is somehow damaging that manhole. That's basically professional argument between Ramesh and the village.
So in
Okay.
the estimate where it says an inspection, I guess, of the manhole needs to be replaced, if inspection, I don't know, needs to be replaced at an additional cost of $38,000, would that fall on the village?
That's another discussion with the village,
Okay,
because the village is stating that they think that our sewer is causing the problem.
okay.
So for the time being, the outcome is that the original estimate was close to 75 and now it's close to 23.
23,000,
We
correct?
significantly reduced the scope of the work.
But we
Fantastic.
also took
Yeah.
out the replacement of the manhole and all of the street construction that added to the cost.
Okay.
And
That
I think
seems
the
like
manhole piece of it was like a huge portion of it, kind of caused concern.
Yeah.
last
It's
month.
because you have to crack the
was.
street open and, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's not a voting item, but I did skip it. It was on the agenda, and we do, you know, even though it's within authority, we've just kind of have that
Right.
agreement that spending money comes to the table, whether it's an inform or approval or whatever. So I wanted to make sure we.
That
had-
policy where you talked about the $35,000 up from 25, even if it's still been 25.
I think Wesley as well, because we had discussed it at length
Yeah.
last time around, that
Yeah.
it deserved to be brought up now.
Yeah, okay. That,
Thanks for the extra work.
do you have anything, Dave?
No.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the
You give
meeting.
me an extra
I'm
hour, right?
assuming-
Yeah, go get the.
No, no, you lost your chance, man. All right, future meeting dates, November 20th, will be a regular board business meeting at
6:15.
It will be at 6:15, okay. In the Hauser Learning Resource Center, December 4th will be a committee of the whole meeting at 7 PM in the multipurpose room at Hollywood School. And December 18th, regular business meeting, 7 PM in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. And I guess we were slated for a January 1st meeting, committee of the whole. That will not be happening. Do we want to move that, or are we just going to cancel that one?
We typically cancel the
Okay.
July one and the January.
That's true, yes, we
yeah.
have. Okay, so that'll be canceled, so then we'll have a regular board meeting later in the month. All right, and with that, this meeting is adjourned.